couple more corrections that we found. I'm going to start you off with the green piece of paper that should be right in front of you. Again, highlighted are the amounts that we changed. We don't normally send money back to the URA once it gets into the city. And so this is just separating the two amounts. It's the exact same amount that was previously reported, but it's just separate. And that changes the purple, which is your URA. And so I printed it purple so you could see it. Again, the reddish highlighted numbers are the numbers that changed. One of the projects that we had in LB that closed was almost the exact same project that you'll see tonight in sewer. And so we are closing the one in LB and sending the money to sewer, but it is URA money, so we're going to send it back to the URA first before we send it back to sewer, so that way it does still stay as URA money. Oh. And if there's no questions regarding that, I will turn it over to Jason Kennedy, our Public Works Director.
Any questions?
Is there anyone on my behalf?
No.
Okay, Jason, please.
Thank you, Mr. Brandis, and all of you Budget Committee members. So welcome to night 2 of 2025 fiscal year budget. And in my opinion, although Aaron was a little upset with me, best night of the budget because it's Public Works night. And before we get started, I will acknowledge them again that we actually have an audience tonight, and this is my Public Works management team, and I really, big round of applause for them. They did a lot of the hard work here to get this all pulled together so that we can talk about it. All right, and with that, we're going to talk a little bit about our department organization. So the Public Works Department has grown quite a bit. We continue to make little subtle changes within to be more efficient, to provide better customer service to all of our members, which are both internal and external customers. We will then go through all of our department and division reviews, and we'll do that in the order that you will find them in the book. So transportation, stormwater, water, wastewater, solid waste, public works admin, engineering, facilities, and fleet services. So similar to what you saw yesterday, the slides are going to direct you to the page where the data is taken from, and on there you will have 2 previous years of actual data, the current fiscal year budget, the manager recommended 25, and a projected 26 for your consideration. In my presentation, I am focusing only on FY24 and FY25, which we're asking you to adopt the 25, and focusing on the primary differences between those two. However, a little bit different than what we saw yesterday, public works are capital projects. It's almost the same thing, that's very synonymous. So we are going to go through quite a few capital projects tonight, all the projects that are non-LB projects. So water capital, stormwater, transportation, and wastewater capital. We are going to cover any new capital project or any capital project that is going to receive an additional $100,000 or more in allocation. And during that, we will talk about the project description, what the anticipated total cost of that project is. If we know when it's going to complete, we'll get as much information as we can. So, organizational structure. As we talked about, Public Works includes water, wastewater, streets, stormwater, fleet, facilities. Sorry, I left transportation out of that list. It just popped in, and I went, wait, there's something missing there. Engineering, our GIS department, and Public Works Administration. We are comprised of 57.5 full-time employees and just under 13,000 hours of temporary and seasonal hours. The organizational structure hasn't changed a lot. We did last year when we came in and talked, I think, talk about moving some structure around where we were reorganizing our stormwater division. As it turns out, we were providing better service without that change, so we have undone that. And we're back to what you saw the year before, and no changes. It never actually made it as far as the budget. The change just kind of happened and then went back. So with that, we are going to be starting on the transportation budget, and on that will occur on pages 172 to 183. So the transportation program is responsible for the maintenance of all of the vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian systems, and that includes the surface repairs, including overlays, sign fabrication and installation, a little bit of curb, gutter, and sidewalk repair, and right-of-way vegetation control, and that is a duty that they share with the Parks Department. A few years back, we made a change where the Parks Division actually manages the contracts for those, while the Transportation Division provides the funding for that. The logic being is the folks in the Parks Department are much more familiar with irrigation controllers and sprinkler systems and plants than our transportation staff, as where they focus their work is on asphalt and concrete and big pieces of machinery. It also houses our street lighting program, which is a real key aspect of what they do. Recommended FTEs is the same this year at 3.2. So page 172, our overall budget. The overall budget comes in at FY25 at $21.84 million with a very modest increase in $920,000, and we're going to drill into those numbers a little bit more on the succeeding slides. The thing to really note is our street maintenance. This is where the work is getting done out in the field, only increased by $25,000 this next upcoming year. And all of the other area is where we're showing a fairly large increase. That is really largely due to our capital transfers. And street lighting is actually still decreasing. As you recall, a few years ago, we converted all of our street lights from incandescent to LEDs, and we're still reaping that benefit, and we're just still trying to massage the budget to come up with what that right number is. And we're down to about $190,000. As you recall, a few years ago, we were over $300,000 per year for street lighting. That was a really good change for us.
Yes, it is.
So looking at the overall transportation, again, on the revenue side, almost all of our revenues do come from our gas tax allocation from the state. That number comes to us from the state of Oregon. We generally get that given to us here in April. We also receive revenues from our transportation utility, but that is only about $1.25 million, so a fairly small portion of the revenues. Looking at the transportation operations budget, again, I told you that that only increased by $25,000. You'll see a big swing in the contractual and professional services, and that's because last year we made a one-time fairly large contribution to one of the dump trucks. It was underfunded and needs to be replaced in a few years, so we adjusted its repayment schedule and withheld quite a bit of additional funds for that year. Looking at the general program ops, this is where a lot of the funds come in and out of for the overall program. What we can see is that our transfers out are holding steady with a slight increase. We were able to transfer $2.925 million to our capital program in transportation while maintaining our contingency within our fund balance policy. So I think we hit most of these, but major adjustments in the program. The personnel services did increase $99,000, $478,000. This does reflect a reclassification of 0.4 FTE from a utility worker 2 to a utility worker 3. The thought being as we re-merge those, we really want to get a lead worker in that group, in the United Stormwater and Transportation group, so we're going to reclassify one of those positions. The position already exists within the bargaining unit. We're just going to make it available within this division. And then again, we already talked about the negative number on the contractual services side. Otherwise, Shelley and the team did a tremendous job of turning in a very flat budget. Where these dollars are spent is pretty much almost equally between contractual and personnel, with just a small portion going to materials and supplies. It really is about the people. I see your finger poised on the button, sir. Do you want me to stop for a second? Otherwise, I'm going to...
Questions?
Because we're going to launch right into capital. And when I go through the capital pages, I'm going to kind of go through the slide and I'm going to scan. And if I don't see a question, I'm going to kind of move on because we do have quite a few capital programs to go through. Yes, sir.
So if we are moving on to capital, I do have a question. The contingencies and ending fund balances, I'm guessing they're showing up in our budget book as ending fund balances because the previous years are actuals. Were they budgeted as contingencies in your prior two?
Go ahead. It really is a fundamental change, and I believe what we're doing is instead of leaving them in an ending fund, we're leaving them in a contingency because then they're available for council to allocate. Go Go ahead.
Sorry,
Or
just
did I
so-
miss the intent of the question?
I think so.
Okay. Thank
Page
you.
170.
That kind of is part of that gets to my intent, yeah.
So 177, we actually calculate the ending fund balance, but there probably was budgeted in contingencies, and so we zero it out for actuals.
Right, so I guessing, my question is, in like fiscal '22 and '23, did we budget the entirety of the ending fund balance as a contingency, or did we have an actual unappropriated ending fund balance?
So typically, previously it did change a little bit between fund to fund. We're trying to push everything into contingencies because there is more flexibility for council moving forward, because there's actually Oregon state statute that says you can't move unappropriated ending fund balance unless there is a true FEMA emergency. That's how it reads. So we're trying to give that flexibility and move those fund balances into contingency.
So I guess the follow-up to that would be, how frequently do gas taxes remitted to us?
Monthly.
You know.
Yep.
Other questions?
Okay, great. Oh,
Rick?
I know the city accounting system is totally different from traditional accounting, but why is equipment under contractual services? It seems like that would just be people, not equipment.
so they are contracting with the fleet group for the maintenance and the purchase of their vehicles is a way to look at it. Yep. Okay. So let's launch into capital. This is Allen Creek Road Improvement, TR 6116, and I'm going to bounce you back and forth between your budget books, and I apologize, but we just moved to the capital book and page 17. This project has been on the books now for a really long time, and I'm actually pretty excited. Wade is really close to getting this one over the line. We are going to get this project done. We're really close. It's been there. We've gotten a lot of funding from ODOT. We keep working with them. We are asking for an additional allocation of $500,000 in transportation system development charges, an additional $250,000 in gas tax revenue, and $100,000 from stormwater operations. And that is to fund a regional stormwater facility in that area. Total project cost is $4.772 million. It's very important to note that that is the city-administered portion of that project. The overall project cost is over $13 million. It's a pretty significant transportation project. Okay. TR 6333, this is another project that's been on the books for quite a while, and this is really just a pass-through grant, which helps to fund transit in Grants Pass. We receive $123,380 through a federal grant. The city contributes $14,000, which is, I believe, 10%ish of the funds from our gas tax to be able to support that. That money passes through us to Josephine Community Transit and helps to fund transit in the area.
Tripp?
So why is this on the capital budget instead of in operating?
This is our tracking mechanism to make sure that we track the money in as well as the money to Josephine County.
Project TR 6373 on page 25 of your capital book. This is to identify an area for another potential pedestrian and bike crossing. We are asking for an additional $125,000 for which are bikeway funds. These are funds that are allocated only for biking and walking. Total project cost is unknown at this time. This project will actually fund a study which will identify the exact area, as well as preliminary design and cost estimating.
Rick?
Do I recall correctly that this bridge cannot be considered for the backup for the Redwood Sewer, the secondary line, because of the location?
It could be. It depends on where this bridge ends up going. That was one of the options that we were looking at, and if it would work out that they could go together, we would. When you get far down the river gets very wide, though, and it's hard to find a place just to site a pedestrian bridge, so it could potentially move quite a bit upstream. So it's really just a matter of when we find a location.
Josh?
So is this a grant specifically for pedestrian bike? And that's why we're doing this? Is this part of a master plan that, like?
It is part of our transportation master plan to promote non-motorized biking, but it is actually part of our gas tax revenue, but there is a certain percentage that is allocated to non-motorized transportation and must be used for that
And
purpose.
so that's what this is
Yes.
filling. It's not that we're redirecting.
Correct.
To do another study.
Yep.
That we could use.
It's part
for-
of the gas tax that
Got it.
must be spent on non-motorized transportation.
Cool.
TR 6384, this is Hillcrest Drive improvement. This is a project that's a couple years old, but it's making quite a bit of progress, and will improve Hillcrest Drive from 9th Street to Beacon Drive. Pretty much that completes Hillcrest Drive and bringing it up to city standards. We are asking for an additional $200,000 in transportation system development charges and $100,000 in wastewater operation funds for this one, and that's because we have to replace some sewer line while we're in there fixing the road up. Total project cost, we're now estimating at about 4.35 million, revised from about 3.9. And of course, ongoing costs are just the design and acquisition of some right-of-way in addition to maintenance when the project is complete.
Tripp?
Yep.
Rick?
Was there any cost sharing with Josephine County, since that was one of their roads at one point, on that part of those figures that are up there?
I'm gonna let Wade answer that. I think the short answer is gonna be no, but I'll bet there's a longer answer.
There is. So no, they're not directly contributing to this project. However, they did do a sidewalk extension project from about Dewey Court all the way up to Hillcrest on 10th Street. That is going to tie in to our project, as well as the seismic bridge retrofitting that ODOT did on the overlay, or I mean the overpass. So all of that has been designed in to all tie together with the multimodal pass. So Josephine County's contribution essentially was the sidewalk on 10th.
I knew there was a longer answer.
Tripp?
So in the same vein, is there any cost sharing with the property owners abutting this street?
No, not on a project of this scale. I mean, we could potentially, or council could choose to do an advanced finance district that would reimburse the city for the cost of their half-street improvements. But on these large-scale projects, the city traditionally has just chosen to fund them.
So, I mean, just like that could be a worthy investment, right? And all of a sudden that property becomes developable.
Yeah.
If we do develop it, will we come out ahead from the SDCs from the development in those parcels and the property taxes that we're going to be bringing in? Like, if I'm not incorrect,
Yeah.
all those parcels are still in the county, right?
I'm not sure I can pull that from my memory. I think some are and some are not. I think a lot of them are actually in the city and not in the UGB. But you're getting to right on the borderline where a lot of them actually may be true county too, because the UGB gets funny over there. So.
Valerie?
I was going to ask, are you doing some water work up in Hillcrest at the same time?
So we were looking at whether or not we were going to run water as part of this project. The master plan has the reservoir in a location over off of Oslin Drive, which means that we have to run 2 zones past this area. We're not sure that that's the correct location to put it now. So we're doing a quick study with our master services consultant that might eliminate that water, the need for the water in this project.
Okay, so you're saying, so will because I do know that that one area was annexed, or just recently is in the process of annexing up there underneath the freeway. So they already have water and sewer that's
I
already
believe
there?
we just served that with the project that we crossed the freeway with, right?
Sort of. So there's a zone split in there. So the water line that we would run or could run in Hillcrest could not serve that development. However, they're able to bring water off of Jack's Landing, which is up kind of up by the exit up there. So they're going to bring water down, and then if they get some of the grants that they're looking at, we'll extend those water lines down. So it'd be a pretty short connection at that point.
I think she was actually referring to Greenfield, the one that just came through.
No, I was actually referring to
Oh,
the
got it,
Veterans
okay.
Village, because I know them, but because you did put some up for the Greenfield, correct? That was part of that
Yep.
project, the RV project? And it's also, our park is part, right, that's part of the,
That's part of the reason that this project was really kind of gaining some traction, was that park looked like it was going to develop. Now it may, who knows where that'll happen, but we still need to get the street done.
okay,
It's the last undeveloped portion of that connector as you feed around Beacon and around, so.
okay, and it's in my neighborhood, so thank you.
Lincoln Elementary, TR46410, I'll get there. And this is Safe Routes to School, and this is really just to close this project out. We did get a great grant from the state of Oregon for Safe Routes to School. The project's going to finish the installation of sidewalk and some pedestrian infrastructure around Lincoln Elementary. However, when we finally got the project out on the street, the inflation that we have seen in the construction market decimated the budget, and we did not get done the amount of work that we needed to get done. So we are looking for an additional $450,000 in gas tax, which will complete that project, or nearly complete it, with a slightly reduced scope, and will keep us in compliance with the grant resources.
Josh?
So,
Sorry.
sorry,
That's
on
okay.
on the previous one. So there's been a ton built up there, so is there stuff still left to be done? Like, what specifically is left to be done?
Yeah, there's a couple of connectors, but Wade will speak.
Yeah, there were several other aspects of the project. All the ADA ramps on 9th Street along that needed to get upgraded, as well as sidewalk infill on Riddle and a little bit on Memorial. There's a pedestrian access that comes off of Memorial to the
Yep.
back of the school. We felt that was really important. A lot of kids use that. A piece that may be reduced from the scope would be sidewalk on Heffley, because that's just getting to be quite a ways away from the school. So we're in discussions with the state to see if we can cut that out of the scope.
Cool.
But it is designed, so we could do it at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah, we've all been caught off guard by how much pricing has gone up. It's really been a challenge on the public works side. This is Wade's Roundabout, we're calling this one, TR6426, and this is the Foothill and Agnes Roundabout. We all are familiar with the intersection. It is chaotic, it's bumpy, it receives a lot of traffic. We really honestly believe that this is the best location to start with putting a roundabout here in Grants Pass. It should help smooth out the traffic flow in that area. Even with the big trucks, they can easily make it around the roundabout. It should smooth out the traffic flow, we believe, in that area. So we are asking for an additional $500,000 in gas tax. The project cost is probably going to be about $3.15 million. We've already been in talk with adjacent property owners, and everybody is receptive, and we're moving forward with preliminary design.
Tripp?
So just given the cost escalation here, like, how long has this been on the books for?
2 years?
Okay.
There's a date on the project. Hang on. Let me.
Okay, I see, created 2/4/2022.
2022. Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty new. Yeah.
Rick?
So Jason, is that intersection known for a high volume of accidents?
I don't believe it actually is, but I've not pulled it. I don't believe so. It just gets a lot of traffic, and it's awkward because of the multiple lanes all coming together right there.
So when you introduce something brand new into the city, such as a roundabout, do roundabouts have a history of accidents when people aren't used to them?
I think everybody's, I know right here locally, we're probably not as used to them, but if you travel anywhere besides Grants Pass, you're going to experience them. So I think people are getting more comfortable with them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is it right here? Sorry, right.
Robert?
Robert.
Thank you.
We're talking about Foothill and Agnes. Oh,
Yep.
Foothill and Agnes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You've got Walmart. There's trucks coming in and out of there
Yep.
all of the time. And there's huge.
Yep.
You're going to be able to accommodate the size of these things?
Yes, we will.
Okay, I wish you luck.
Thank you. All right, project TR 6432 on page 32 of your capital book. And this is the fourth bridge refinement study. And this will be starting to accumulate funds to really determine where the fourth bridge over the Rogue River needs to be. We are asking for an additional $100,000 in gas tax. Total study cost is probably about $1 million. After we complete the siting study, we'll do some preliminary design, which will help us better dial in on what the cost of that crossing will be.
Rick?
I'm on the MPO committee, and I believe they threw out a figure for that bridge to be around 14 million,
I would not be surprised if not higher,
higher.
quite a bit higher.
And the other impact we could have on the city, it was my understanding that ODOT will not be participating. Is that,
I find it unlikely, but it really depends on, there's some joint work that we're doing. South Y is a big determiner. If the fourth bridge can divert enough traffic from the South Y that the South Y can stay the way it is, which we all know it's nearing capacity, but if you can get traffic off of it, that might be a good investment as opposed to trying to fix the South Y, because the South Y is going to get very expensive.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wade. TR 6446. This is A Street reconstruction. This is a new capital project on page 33 of your book. And this project was created to reconstruct A Street from 8th to Baker. And this is a full reconstruct from 8th Street to Baker. And then overlay between Baker and Beacon Drive. And also includes quite a few sidewalk improvements. You have to, as soon as we start overlaying, we have to fix all the sidewalk ramps and make sure that they're up to current ADA standards. So we're asking for $1 million of gas tax revenue, $150,000 in wastewater operations, and $150,000 in wastewater system development charges. And I think that was $150 in wastewater ops. I think I said 100, so.
Sorry, Josh.
This is probably way too in the weeds, but I am just kind of curious. Are you planning on widening that at all? Because that is one tight road, particularly as you get closer to Baker.
We are not. We are looking into the elimination of potentially some parking, which will make it feel wider. There really is no room to widen this street without taking a tremendous amount of property. So it is unlikely that we would go that route. About as far as I think council would be willing to go is maybe eliminating parking on one side. But we did discuss it, and I think the discussion was no, eliminate no parking. We're gonna do a study, right? Ask the property owners some thoughts. But it is very narrow, very tight, which also is beneficial from the school perspective, because it helps to keep this car speed down, but it is an arterial, which is designed, should be a higher speed road. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one. And on to stormwater. See, we're flying through these. We're gonna get you guys out of here before 10 o'clock tonight. I knew that would be popular. So this is pages 184 to 193 of the previous book. We're back to the big book now. And our stormwater program has really developed over the last few years, and this is where we see all of our costs for our MS4, which is our municipal separate storm sewer system. I think I got all of those S's in the right order. Phase 2 permit that we were issued a few years ago. It is a quite involved permit. We now have a plethora of plans, including a stormwater management manual, a sediment and erosion control manual, and this is quite a few development code as well as municipal code revisions to comply with these new requirements. It is really going to change the face, I think, in the next couple years of development as we look for more green methods of handling stormwater runoff. The intent is both to clean it and to reduce the amount of water that's going into the pipes, which is ideal, and we want to get back to a more natural state, but it does put a little bit more burden on both the staff, ourselves, and the developers and the homeowners, because with these systems, when we had a catch basin and a grate and a pipe, it's done for the homeowner. Now, when you have potentially a retention structure on a property, that homeowner has an has some maintenance to take care of forever. And so there is some work for them. This is also where we do house our street sweeping contract, our drainage and vegetation control, and our intergovernmental agreement with Grants Pass Irrigation District. As you recall, a few years back, we entered into an IGA with GPID for the shared use of facilities. That's both our use of their canals and their use of our drainage pipes. So recommended FTEs for this program is 4.58. And you're going, that's a really odd number, but it has to do with urban forester and our locator.
Joel?
So Jason, I just had one quick question. Before this year's budget, we'd never had a contingency. Now we do. For,
Yeah,
if I understand that correctly, at 465,000?
No, we've always had a contingency. It's just, it may have been reflected in a different line. So we've always carried a fund balance, but it may have been unappropriated at the time, so it shows up differently. What page are you
So let
looking
me repeat back what I think I heard you say. It was previously unappropriated, so there was money there, but it wasn't reflected in the budget.
Not quite. Which page are you looking at, Counselor?
186. I was just wondering what determines when we have contingencies and when we don't? Is it the amount of money available, or?
So generically, we do have a fund balance policy for enterprise funds. And so that is the generic rule, and there's some other in the fund balance policy as well.
Yeah, and so if you look, there was ending balance, but we may not have carried a contingency in those first couple of years because this program is brand new and it was underfunded. And at the end of the closeout, that contingency rolls into ending balance also, correct? You don't show because you don't finish the year with a contingency.
Yeah, you don't spend contingency, so therefore there's no actuals in a contingency.
So, did you get that, Joel?
No, I didn't, I'm sorry.
So there was a contingency there, but when you get to the end of the year, it shows up in the ending balance
Okay.
because it didn't get spent.
Oh, the $1,060,000.
Yeah.
And so we have no ending, the zero it out, then the ending balance
Yeah.
for the next year.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so your contingency kind of is your ending balance. It's what you plan on not spending, if that's a different way of looking at it. But financially, reporting-wise, your ending balance in the actuals, you don't spend contingency. And then in budgetary practices, it's the exact opposite.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Tripp?
And just the same questions last time. The stormwater fees are the utility charges paid by utility payers.
Yep.
And those are collected monthly, right?
They are collected monthly. Yep. And that's where all the funding comes from for the program. So looking at the overall program budget, stormwater maintenance is very, very flat, slightly down, but that has to do with some staff changeovers. General program ops is also very, very flat. And then our capital construction is showing up, but that really is a function of us accumulating funds for some larger projects, which we'll see a little bit later. Looking at where the revenues are coming from, they come in from our stormwater fees. We're currently estimating about $2.7 million for FY25. And interest, you see a big swing there, but really we were under budgeting on that. And JC and his folks have done a tremendous job with the revised investment policy. And the interest rates have not been bad, but just the revised the policy for investing has been amazing for the public works funds, where we have been seeing quite a good return on all of our funds. So very pleased about that. And then again, the capital construction is just we're accumulating some funds there for some larger projects. Looking at the operations budget, again, Shelley has done an amazing job of keeping that budget very flat. Almost no real changes to speak of in the operating budget. General program ops, this is where, again, those funds transfer in and out of the budget. We're hoping to transfer about $1.35 million into the capital program. This is also where we pay for our share of the customer service and postage for mailing bills.
Rick?
Jason, we have an IGA with GPID, as you mentioned on that. And it's my understanding we pay a certain amount to them every year. Where does that appear in there, and approximately how much do we pay them?
I think I actually have that exact number, and no, I do not. It's going to be $1.3 million this year. They, right in that range, they get a 3%, up to 3% increase each year. It's tied to the CPIU West. CPIU has been running ahead of 3%, so they've been getting a 3% increase every year for quite a few years now. And if you remember, we started in the just under 100,000. I want to say 89,000 or 90,000. Does that sound right? So it's been getting about a 3% increase every year since then. And it shows up in our contractual services in this budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sorry, missed the second part of that.
Tripp?
Do we have any sense of what percentage of their budget that is?
I actually don't. It's not insignificant. I mean, it's a large payment.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, do we have a sense of whether or not we're subsidizing irrigation water for farmers?
So this is one of those tricky ones. I can't speak to that. We are getting a benefit from the use of their system. So from that perspective, they maintain all those miles of ditches, and so we're getting a benefit from it. But are we subsidizing where their water is going? Potentially. That's a really tough one to answer. It is. So some efficiencies from the stormwater group. I want to say last year or the year before, we added an additional CCTV van to perform routine inspections and cleaning. And since that time, Shelley and her team have been out there mapping and documenting all the deficiencies in the system. We've really increased the integration with GIS and our CMMS, which is our computerized maintenance management system. So we're now able to run reports and provide documentation to DEQ that we're in compliance with our permit at a pretty easy snap of the fingers. So it's really great. But we are finding lots of stuff in the system that's pretty poor. As you recall, the stormwater system, when we implemented this fee, was that system that nobody thought about. It's those pipes that, oh, the rainwater went away, so who cares? Until it backs up, and then it floods people's houses, and then suddenly we're looking at it again. So we've got a project we're talking about here in a minute that'll really illustrate that. But the dedication and the work that council did to dedicate funding for the stormwater has really, really paid off. We're able to be out there, they're cleaning. I think since we've really implemented it, our localized flooding has been nil. Because the team is actively out there with adequate resources, cleaning pipes and swales and making sure that we're able to stay ahead of that localized flooding. So stormwater capital. This.
I have a question.
Sorry, Tripp?
So you mentioned at the outset that this program is relatively nascent and it is related to our pollution permitting. And I guess I kind of have a similar question along the lines of like having to add ADA features to A Street. Mm-hmm. Are property owners going to be looking at stormwater requirements in parts of the city that traditionally haven't had them as our permitting comes into force?
So no, the short answer is no, but under certain redevelopment conditions, it could. But generally for a single family residential, if you just redevelop your single-family residential, no, this won't affect you.
But what if you're redeveloping a large commercial parcel with parking?
That is going to affect you quite a bit.
Okay.
Yep. And it used to be that you would just bury a series of pipes underground, maybe retain it underground. That's not an option anymore. Or not the first option. It may be the very, very last option if you can prove that it won't work any other way. But for most part, you cannot do that anymore. So Project DO 6353, this is our emergency storm drain project. This is where when we find those deficiencies, and oftentimes it's where you'll be traveling through a pipe and that pipe will be missing in the middle and you can't wait. It happens more frequently than you would think. So we are asking for an additional amount of funding in this of $150,000. Typically we fund it with about $100,000 per year, but it just helps us to be able to mobilize very quickly and get out there and make those emergency repairs. DO 6371, this is our big one right now, and it's really kind of moving up the food chain. We need to get this done here pretty quick. This is our 5th Street storm drain between G and M Streets. It's on page 44 of your capital book. This one, we're looking for quite a few resources. We are asking for an additional $425,000 in stormwater capital, $50,000 in stormwater system development charges, $750,000 in wastewater operations, and $250,000 in gas tax revenue. So a pretty broad base of funding there. Estimated total project cost is about $3.7 million. And again, this one is really important. Council has quite a few things going in the Owl parking lot. We would like to get this storm drain line replaced ahead of that project kicking off. This one we love this story. It used to be a sewer line. The sewer line was reaching the end of its life. It was out of capacity. It was starting to deteriorate. So what did we do? We turned it into a storm drain line and then run it for another 50 years because that's what you do. It is really, really at the end of its service life now. This pipe is done and needs to be replaced.
Tripp?
So, this project has been going since 2019.
Yep.
And like others that are large, we've also seen a revision upwards, but this one seems a lot more modest than some of those. Like can you explain like why we're not seeing $1.4 million additional
I think
cost?
this one, we updated the cost last year and got it much closer. And so this year's change was a lot smaller. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, we've been progressing the design on this. So as you start honing in on to 100% plans, your variation in your engineer's estimate narrows down. So we should get this one bid in the next few months. We're getting 100% plans back and we're gonna get on the street. Hopefully we'll start doing some construction this fall and into this winter. So we got a pretty good idea where it's coming in at.
Josh? Yeah. Okay. Valerie?
I guess my question is timing, because when I think of Fifth Street down there, I think of between Arlong the Rogue and the Christmas tree lighting. So are we working around those timeframes, or what does that look like?
We are. And we haven't finalized the special provisions yet, but we'll call out dates that they have to be out of certain areas. Typically, when you install any kind of a gravity-style system like sewer or storm, you start at the bottom and work your way up. This may be a case where we'll go ahead and knock out that kind of upper portion up towards G Street first to get it out of the way. That could be night work, get in and out of there to disrupt that area as little as possible.
Does that include the depot area, or is it just the street starting? Because I remember that sewer goes underneath the building there, so that's actually fine. We're not touching the
No,
No.
not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. DO 6385, this is a project that's been on the books for a little bit, since 2020, almost since the signing of the IGA, if not a little bit after, I guess, with Grants Pass Irrigation District. And the project is to regrade and resurface the canal between Wagon Wheel Drive and Allen Creek to help alleviate periodic flooding. So this is one of those where we definitely both jointly benefit. We are asking only for an additional $30,000 in stormwater capital, but we are showing a matching revenue from Grants Pass Irrigation District of approximately $375,000. So the IGA specifies that when we do projects on joint infrastructure, that we share that cost 50-50 with them because we both mutually benefit. Again, this one has been on there for a while. I'm not sure when GPID will be ready to bring forward their dollars.
Tripp?
How is $375,000 50-50 on a $1.2 million project?
It's not quite. I think it was based on the original estimate.
Are we confident our counterparty is going to be able to come up with the remaining amount?
No.
Okay.
No. It's been a challenge working with them. They're great, and we do the maintenance. They get that done when they need to. Capital projects, though, are a little bit more of a challenge for them. And then we struggle municipally. We have a lot of rules to follow, and those rules do make projects more expensive. So,
Do we know if there's any sort of like cross default provision that would allow us to withhold the remainder of their share from our payments to them if they don't come up with the the money on this capital project?
I can't answer that question. I don't think there is. We'll have to look at that. I'm looking at Aaron because he was instrumental in the creation of that IGA, but it's been a while now.
It's been a while. We'd have to review the IGA with them.
Yeah. So next project, DO 6436 on page 46 of your capital book. This is one that was created last year. This is out in the Redwood area, right? Make sure I got that one right. Oh, L Sports Park, gotcha. And it is just flatter than a fritter out there, and we have a lot of water that just stands there, and this will help get that water out of those fields and the last bit of land out there and over to the river. We're asking for $300,000 in stormwater capital. This will get the preliminary design completed to determine the total project scope, where it needs to go to, and how we can get it to the river.
Josh?
Are fritters really that flat?
The bottoms are,
Okay.
where they sit on the pan. Great question. And I'm going to quit with the remarks. All right. Water. Pages 194 to 209 of the primary book. With those big 3-ring binders, they don't stack really well. So water is comprised of 5 different programs: water treatment, water distribution, the water debt service, general program ops, and water capital construction. As you can imagine, the Water Division's job is to pump and treat the water from the Rogue River, distribute, meter, and bill for water provided to our customers, monitor and report on water quality, maintain our cross-connection and backflow program, maintain the treatment facilities, pump stations, reservoirs, which is 13 pump stations comprised of 53 pumps ranging in size between 40 and 2,300 gallons per minute, and our 8 reservoirs, which range in size from 45,000 to over 5 million gallons, and 191.7 miles of distribution piping. And I did want to note that the 9th reservoir is now under construction in the Meadowwood subdivision. They are actually up there digging and putting in a retaining wall, so it's pretty exciting. They also are responsible for our customer service program, and that's both from a meter leak check to ons and offs, billing questions. Recommended program or FTEs for this program are 6 in treatment and 9.84 in the distribution. See a lot of movement in this program, and we're going to dive into each of those a little bit deeper. Water treatment, we're up about 188,000. Debt service, you're going to see for FY25 is 0. And that is because we are paying off the debt on Reservoir 3 in FY24, and we don't start paying on debt for the water treatment plant currently till FY26, which is when we're estimating our first debt service payments will be made. So we get a 1-year reprieve of no debt service payment for the water fund. General program ops has a big shift, but that again, that's related to transfers, which we'll see. And then our capital construction looks like it took a big jump, but that also is related to the water treatment plant project, and it has to do with the receipt of funds, which we'll dive into much deeper. So looking at the overall program revenues, beginning balance is very solid. We maintain this one right at the bottom edge of the fund balance policy. The reason is we want to maximize our transfers just as high as we can, especially while the water treatment plant project is going. Every dollar that we're able to put into that project helps reduce the amount when we finally get to taking out the final loans that we'll have to borrow and pay interest on. The bulk of the water or the funds do come from the sale of water. We're estimating about $12 million in revenues. We are showing a revenue from the Urban Renewal Agency on this. This is a decision of council to help with the project. And that's the future debt service payments that Urban Renewal was on the hook for. And so we're able to just put that aside for now. We're also showing a transfer in from transportation, and that has to do with a capital project that was closed.
Question?
Sorry.
Since payments for water are such a big part of this revenue, how does the city set water rates?
Boy, we went through, I'm looking at Counselor Lovelace because she was there at every one of those meetings. It was about a 2.5-year process. We worked with a consultant. We look at all of our fixed costs, all of our capital costs. We look at what our operating costs are, and we compile that into a rate structure that then council evaluates. And then we worked through, I want to say, about 6 or 7 revisions of that to try and balance a fixed rate that wasn't overly burdensome with a commodity charge that wasn't too high that discouraged use for everybody. And so it is kind of that balancing act.
So, I mean, this is kind of a simplified view of what the private utility would do, but a private utility would take its operating expenses, its rate base, right?
Yep.
With the assets in the ground minus accumulated depreciation, times the capital charge, and then divide that by delivered units. Like,
Yeah.
if you were to look at the financial picture of the water program here in that same lens, like we have this much capital in the ground, we have this much in operating expenses, and we're going to deliver this much water. Are we short of that simplified standard, and by how much?
A pretty significant margin. So as maybe you weren't there, as we were going through the hearing, so the other thing we did was reset our system development charges. So system development charges are asking growth to pay for that future capacity, right, that they are consuming, as well as pay back the users on the system. We need to expend probably about $7 million per year in capital for pipe replacement, infrastructure replacement due to just aging out. We are asking our infrastructure, our buried pipes, to last about 125 to 130 years. That's a big ask. And when we looked at where we set the rate, we deliberately underfunded it so that we were not overly burdening our ratepayers. As you know, we are not in an economically prosperous area, and so we have a lot of folks that can't afford the service that is being provided to them. So it is a balancing act. We are now probably, I think, on about a 130-year cycle. We were targeting about a 100-year replacement cycle so that you could replace most every piece of infrastructure every 100 years. That was kind of the target.
Go ahead, Joel.
Rick?
Jason, the chart up above shows $68 million in capital construction.
Yeah.
And I believe we have a application in for several grants. What are those grants, and when do we expect to hear from them, and what would be the potential amount?
So part of that 68 million is a receipt from FEMA for the BRIC grant. So we're moving forward. I don't have any firm word, but we have moved up the government tree, for lack of a better word, and we've shaken the bushes, and I have been promised an RFI from FEMA within 2 weeks. So hopefully that'll start to firm that up. We're very confident. The city, I think it was even in the paper, but we were, and I'm going to use the term loosely, awarded a $50 million grant. Not quite yet. We've got a bunch of hoops to get through. We just got to get somebody to start the ball rolling. So I am out there shaking every tree I can find to get that ball rolling. We will get it moving. But the reason that number is so high is we are saying, yes, we're going to start receiving that money. It may not materialize, but we believe it will.
Joel?
So that was my question also. So what I heard you say was the grant, which we haven't received yet, is reflected under capital construction.
Not all of it, but a portion of it is, yes.
Okay, and then where's the other portion represented?
In fiscal year 26.
Fiscal year, okay, thank you.
Okay. So looking at water treatment, diving down into the single program, we're showing a fairly significant increase in contractual services. This is twofold. One is the cost of chemicals has gone up fairly significantly for us, and power. As you can imagine, the water treatment plant uses a lot of power, a lot. And Pacific Power has indicated that they have, more than indicated, they have applied for another rate increase, a fairly significant one. If they get it, it has a very large impact on the water treatment plant operations. We've added some extra dollars in here to accommodate that, should it appear. Otherwise, it's reasonably flat. We'll look at the specific differences here in a sec. So this one is The funds on this, I always laugh because when I was doing this, it pretty much is personnel, materials and supplies, and contractual, almost a third, a third, a third. It just costs a lot of money to operate the water treatment plant. And the materials and supplies is because it's chemicals. Our chemical costs are put that up there. It's not like we're buying a lot of widgets or stuff. It really is power, chemicals, personnel, and those three.
Valerie.
When we do move to the membrane system, will the cost of chemicals be less, or? I mean,
Cost of chemicals is going to be dramatically less. We're going to use a lot less chemicals.
Okay,
than
so
we
that will
did.
be something to look forward to. I'm sure there'll be other
Yes, cost of power will go up.
Okay, all right.
So, I'm going to go past that. So the big differences is 47,000 up in personnel, and this is really just related to our staff moving up through their steps, getting a little bit more, and negotiated increases. The big increase was that 139,000 in contractual, and it was strictly due to electrical and chemicals, and also contractual hauling for our solids process. On the water distribution side, this is a budget that is pretty flat, I would say. When you look at that $97,000 increase, Craig did a great job of balancing that. Similarly, most of his work is all in personnel. The distribution is all about the people on the ground. This is where you get your water services installed, your meter reread, water quality complaints answered, or just our sampling, standard sampling. This is the people that are out there day in and day out getting the job done. And we really appreciate that. So again, personnel is one of the larger increases, and that is really just steps, moving through people's steps, as well as negotiated increases. We have $40,000 in material and supplies, but as we all know, if you've bought anything, it's gone up. And this department uses quite a bit of copper, which has gone up a lot. So it definitely adds up. Water debt service, I'm going to breeze past this one because we kind of talked about it early on, but we do finally pay off the debt on Reservoir 3. And so this is our last year of paying. We will have that 1 year reprieve. And then the initial loans that we've taken out through Business Oregon will start to trigger repayment in fiscal year 26. So that's why we're showing in your book that potential payment. And that is an estimated amount because we have not fully executed those, so we don't know. They've been executed, let me rephrase that. They haven't been closed out, so the amounts may be lower or than what we were contracted for. And if that's the case, the billing amount will decrease. And then general program ops, this is again where we pay for our share of postage and customer service group, which we can't do what we do without Kimberly and her team. We love them, they are amazing. But also where we bring those capital dollars in and out, transfer those out to our various programs. And with that, we get to start the fun stuff, which is the capital side. Meadowood Reservoir, we talked about this just a few minutes ago. This is WA 4971. It is on page 57 of your capital book. We are asking for a fairly significant infusion of cash. We need an additional $2.3 million in water capital and $350,000 in water system development charges. Now, this one did take a very big price jump, and we did update it last year. It has several things that went against us on this project, and when we finally bid it, and the number came in, it was dramatically over. The first was it needed a retaining wall that was more robust than we anticipated. And it cost us quite a few, like $2 million? About $1 million. It is quite a retaining wall. And then the other thing, the cost of the tank itself came in about $1 million also over. So the project is great. It is severely needed in this area. It is under construction. This will get the project completed probably next year, early fiscal year. So we're pretty excited.
Rick?
I know, as you said, over the time, the cost of reservoirs has increased quite a bit.
Yeah.
What was do you remember the cost? I remember this many, many years ago.
I don't, not off the top of my head.
No,
I don't.
okay.
It was less than this.
Yes, quite a bit.
I mean, it really was for a much larger tank, but it didn't require a retaining wall like this one did. This one really had some stuff against it. Where it had to go, it's a challenge to build. So that added some cost and complexity. I
Tripp?
think there was one over here.
So the project started in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
We have this, in the past couple of years, we've seen several large escalations for understandable reasons, but I guess what was going on from like 2006 to 2023, or whenever we started seeing these big jumps in costs?
That's a great question. We were looking for property, and also it wasn't as high of a priority. We were focusing most of the resources on the water treatment plant, and we can divert as many over. Now, what really triggered this is the developer finally started to develop those upper properties, and if we didn't get in there and get this built now, it was going to be almost impossible to build in the future. And so that kind of moved us ahead on a schedule that we weren't quite ready for.
Would you say we opened the project prematurely?
I would not. I mean, we needed it quite a while ago, but it wasn't as high a priority as the water treatment plant. So again, we were really trying to divert all of our resources to that project to keep our borrowing lower, knowing that this one would be coming along later. But no, we did not open it prematurely.
So I guess just my final question on this project would be like, how much of the 8.75 is the cost of delaying and not having the resources earlier? Or perhaps it's money well paid now because finally there's development there and we should have waited a little longer to open the project anyhow. Like,
I don't know if I could put a number. I would, do you want to try, I mean, 10, 20%? I mean, it's not insignificant. The inflation over that period
yeah, I mean,
has
the
been
inflation
dramatic.
alone, but like, this is a much bigger jump than just inflation, right? This is lots of scope, lots of...
Scope, I think, was a lot of it. The retaining wall was not expected. That was part of unfortunate. So, and we didn't have property before either, and that's part of it as well.
And I guess I would just add that sometimes the water reservoirs need to be opportunistic based upon the developments in the area. We knew this was the right location. We probably could have purchased it a long time ago, but the cost of running an oversized water line from the existing system at that time all the way up the hill would have been an astronomical amount of money. So in this case, the developer was able to install it. We paid a modest fee to upsize it larger than 8-inch as it went closer to our reservoir. So it made sense to kind of wait and be opportunistic as well.
Joel?
So I need to ask an ignorant question. That water capital, my understanding is that's a sinking fund, correct? That you put money into from our water fees? Or what is the water capital fund here in this particular?
So the water
line?
capital fund is the accumulation of all of these capital projects. And generally, it's not just one big pot of money. We generally plug those dollars into specific projects.
Right, and where does the money come from?
It comes from the excess between water revenue and operations expense.
Right, so it is a sinking fund then, and right? So that you put money away to make capital investments?
Yeah, you are putting money away, and oftentimes, like our projects are so large, you have to put money away for years to be able to accumulate those.
So I congratulate you on that, because not all of our financing has been that way.
No, well, the city did a great job, when they updated the water rate and we were able to start putting that money away, those are buying down dollars. We're down, especially if we get the BRIC grant, our borrowing on this project is gonna drop into the $20 million range, maybe a little bit higher. That's huge when we look at the debt service payment, because we were looking at having to borrow close to $56 million. And $56 million worth of borrowing at 4% is painful. To be able to cut that in half is a really big deal.
I hear you. Okay, thank you.
I'm being optimistic, JC, come on. He's questioning my 4%. He thinks it's much higher, which it is. So, yes.
Tripp?
The BRIC grant's for the water treatment plant, right? Okay.
Yep.
We've moved.
It is, yes. Yep, so this is
I was just gonna
WA
say-
6207. It is on page 61 of your capital. The costs on this project are associated with the planning, design, and construction of the new water treatment plant. We are asking for an allocation of 5.95 in water capital, an additional 9.05 in state revolving loan funds. $2 million in congressional appropriations, $25 million in the federal BRIC grant. Now, we're estimating that over 2 fiscal years. The grant, we have been told, is $50 million if it all comes through. And that covers everything from soup to nuts with that project.
So back in the capital construction part of the big book on page 206, you have it there for there being a federal grant of 30 million. Is that in the
I think
bag or that's?
I think
what is
that's the
that?
combination of the 25. Do you want to help me out on that one? Because I'm not 100% familiar. What page are you on? 206. Thank you. And that could be the combination of all of the grants, because there's quite a grant component. The loans that we're getting through Business Oregon almost all have a fairly significant grant portion of them. So while we might be borrowing $6 million, we're only paying back $3 million. And that might be accounting for that. I'm looking to JC, he's done the math on these for
So
me.
do we have that money, or is this a grant we hope to get?
So the ones from Business Oregon we don't have them yet. They're all but secured. Business Oregon has been amazing to work with. That money will be coming to the city of Grants Pass. BRIC is the one that I personally am a little bit more skeptical on, just because you're dealing with the federal government. I think we're going to get it. It just is going to take longer than we want it to.
Tripp?
So, since we're budgeting based on the revenue coming through, and it sounds like we don't have some sort of contractual reason to demand that comes through, with this big of an outlay, would we need to do any sort of supplemental budgeting if it ends up not coming through to keep this project online, or are we just going to punt on the project again?
No, we have quite a bit of cash yet in this project. And if council authorizes the GMP, which we will be asking them to take a look at late summer, and they say, yes, we can afford that. And that would really, in my opinion, be contingent upon darn near some wet ink on a contract from FEMA for $50 million and some other things. But if they make that decision, at that point, we may have to do some short-term borrowing to be able to make a couple of those initial payments if we're low on cash, because all of these grants are reimbursable. But once we get that first one in the queue, they'll be turned around very quickly. But we are sitting on quite a bit of cash, so we'll be able to go for quite a while.
Yeah, to answer the previous question, so you can't see it all in this project, but part of the 30 million is the $2 million congressional appropriation. When we get to the Redwood Highway looping, which is another 3 million, that makes up your total of $30 million from federal money.
Josh?
Thank you.
So, 2 quick questions on a follow-up on Tripp here. How much cash on hand does the city have for this project?
Boy, it's 12 plus. I'm not sure where we're sitting today. He's going to look it up for us.
Okay.
It's 10 to 12 million, I'm guessing, in that range.
So there isn't an updated version of what the estimated growth is here, but if I remember correctly, it wasn't that high. What was the estimated total last year, the year before, and the year before that?
So I think in your budget book, it shows that last year it was probably in the 130s. Now, we did adjust that because we're actually taking in costs all the way back to its inception, which was, what page am I supposed to be on? Thank you. All the way back to 2013. And so there's a lot of costs, studies, property acquisition. So the number last year, I think, was lower than that 147. It's in the 130. Current estimate has been holding right at about 110 for the total construction cost.
So total construction costs were what was actually talked about last time. It didn't include incurred costs from previous
It's very
years.
possible that number.
So that's a $30 million discrepancy. So I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, we increased it quite a bit. We don't know what the final price is. We're guesstimating right now that we'll still hover in that 110 to 120 range. We're very hopeful. The number has been pretty consistent.
Well, considering, I guess I'm a little apprehensive here just because I'm looking at everybody else's things here and I'm seeing anywhere between a 5 and 20% increase. So wouldn't it behoove us to start to just consider that that's going to be the final cost?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that the 110, 120 number is very good. The reason is A, we just received the updated cost estimate today. We are getting regular cost estimate updates from the design build team. When we get large shifts in that cost, we put our heads together, we change things. As an example, we made a change to our solids lagoons today that resulted in a $2 million shift towards our favor, which means we eliminated $2 million from the program. And so we're able to make some of those adjustments. Now, I will say, we have value engineered this project to within an inch of its life. It is still a very, very good, robust project that will last the city for a lot of years. But we've eliminated some redundancy, but it is still a very good project.
Yeah, and I can't comment. I'm not a water expert, but I can say the price of construction,
Yep.
the inflation aspects.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a time where we have substantial increases, and I think if the plan is to only budget for 110, that feels very optimistic to the point that it could end up impacting us. So and I think having clear estimations of what the project costs are, as opposed to putting in 147 here, would be probably good for future years as you're really taking a look at what are our actual costs going to be.
Fair.
By next year, we'll have our maximum price, and so we'll be able to have the. true
Yeah, it should
number
be
on that.
early in the fiscal year, actually. We're hoping to get it in front of council in August or September.
Okay.
And then we'll have the final price at that time.
Trip?
Yeah, so I just looked it up. Current cash balance is 18.2 million.
So this project was opened in 2013. So it includes it's not like the need for a water treatment plant wasn't identified well before then, right? And the actual through fiscal 23 just includes the costs that we have identified or have paid since the project was open, right?
Yes.
And so, kind of given the longevity of all this, like going back to your point about bricks saving us money, I mean, considering how long this has been in the public forum, and like this water treatment plant was just as needed back in 2009 when real interest rates were negative and a bunch of construction workers were out of work. And we've been sitting here trying to accumulate money, and you're also saying that, hey, look, we're having to extend our assumed useful life on all of our pipes. Like, it's great we're getting a whole bunch of federal money to bring us over the edge, but how much less would this have cost if we had run the utility in such a way to be ready to pounce on it when...
Yeah, I can't argue with
Like,
anything that
closer
you
to the
just said,
need.
Mr. Andrew. Yeah, and we've tried, we had a lot of decisions to make. We had challenges with acquiring property. We had challenges with technology selection. We had challenges with funding, making sure that the rate was sufficient enough to be able to cover debt. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges that went into this. Council had to make a lot of hard decisions that took quite a bit of time. So.
You go ahead.
Josh?
Well, just to kind of like, I guess the question that I would have is, is this just the normal operating procedure to have such a long run-up for it? So you started in 14, that's 10 years. Is that kind of like what other municipalities, I know like there's some coastal guys who've been able to turn and burn some stuff in like 2 to 4 years that didn't end well, but that's a different story altogether. But, so I'm just kind of curious to know, like, what is the average size for this type of thing around the
I
state?
wouldn't think it's quite as long as this. But, this project did identify the need. Then it said, okay, we have to implement a rate structure. And then it said, well, now we have to hire, the contractors. So I think other municipalities who maybe are a bit more cash flush can capitalize on that by moving faster.
There's also, though, we had to go through a partial condemnation process, which delayed the project for some time. And also,
year.
whenever you switch the elected officials, you sometimes are switching the momentum. and you're gearing down, because then there's a re-education process, and that happened in this process also, where we got a new council come in a number of years ago, not the current council that's seated, and we need to reassess, do we really need a plant again? Well, we already did that 2 years in advance, but we had to redo that again. So that is just the reality of that when you're looking at transition also of elected officials.
And it's hard for them. I mean, it's a big learning curve. You know, they're not water treatment experts either. And so you really have to go through and, you know, and we're at a point where the existing treatment plant now is almost 100 years old. We're well into the 90s and it's showing its age. And it could be any day, or it could be 10 years from now, or, you know, never. But it is a risk that needs to be addressed. So council has taken a lot of steps to get us to where we're at.
Joel?
So what's in the past is in the past. What's in the future is, it looks to me like you're going to have the plant completed by the end of fiscal year '26, except for $30 million, or it just has future there for beyond that.
Yeah, we're
So
actually
when is the plant
it's
gonna
going
be
to probably now be fiscal '27 or '28. We only look a little bit ahead. So,
Okay.
no, unfortunately, we're probably closer to fiscal '27 or '8.
So it'll be completed in fiscal year '27 or '28. Okay, thank you.
Trip?
So more of a technical question on the financing, like this asset's gonna last a long time. How many years do we think that's gonna last?
80.
And are we matching the maturity of the financing to that?
The maturity of the financing will be much more aggressive, probably 30.
So what's
35.
the strategy there with not
Hopefully,
matching?
we can keep putting money away at the end of that so that we're planning for the next major project, because you're going to have to replace a water plant in that 80-year window. So the intent would be, I won't be here. This will definitely be up to the people that follow me. But, you know, realistically, at that point, the water treatment plant replacement fee that has been implemented should probably be looked at to carry forward for the next treatment plant replacement project. I mean, that would be a really wise decision.
But the annual cost of operating that treatment plant will be lower if we extend the maturity, right? Like, just like if you go long on a home loan, your payment's gonna be lower.
I don't think we've ever looked at anything longer
Oh,
than
with
30.
a longer, yeah, we did we went up to like 35 years with WIFIA, and it did lower that debt service payment.
But it's hard to find anything longer than I'm trying to,
WIFIA is about the best that you can do, and I think the max that they will do is 35 years.
yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty
Yeah,
hard.
I don't want to say everything that the consultant gave forward to us. The longest was 30 years.
Right, I mean, if there's not a lender out there willing to lend against the project for 80 years, you're not gonna find it anyhow, but like, we have a whole lot of other capital things, and if we're just speeding up repaying a project that's going to last for 80 years anyhow, we could be using those water revenues to replace more of the assets that need to be replaced.
I would say that Jason's done a very good job of shaking the state tree for some low-interest loans in pieces. So we've gotten a few loans right now at 1%, just in a couple $1 million at a piece. So we're trying to do the best we can with what we have and the best information that we have today.
And the 9.05, if I could that also is going to be at 1% interest, and over 6 of that is debt forgiven. So we're not 6. Yeah, 6 of that is debt forgiven. So we're working really hard to try and leverage that, and that'll lower that borrowing to keep that low.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can be investing more in the distribution system.
And then kind of the final technical debt-y type question, the URA can contribute 16% of the debt repayment?
8%.
8%.
Or, no, it is 18%, sorry, yeah,
18.
18%.
Okay, 18. And
Of the
it was
debt service. And
right
so we
there.
have calculated that out, and we showed that first payment coming in this year.
So within the URA mechanically, like, let's say we borrow for 35 years. I mean, do we anticipate keeping the URA open for 35 years to pay that on
Boy,
the
how
same
many times did we
schedule,
run
or
these numbers around? What we actually did was we calculated it to pay out the amount that it would up to the end of the debt of the URA, because the URA ends before the debt pays off. So we increase the amount per year to help to cover that. Is that a fair way to say that?
Right, so if the timing there doesn't quite work, we're saving more money in the URA to save up to be able to pay for the full debt repayment ahead of schedule. At least it's proportionate, right? Like,
I don't know if we're saving it, we're spending more each year in the URA than the 18% that we will pay in debt service for that year.
right, but that 18% is payable over 35 years,
Yes.
right? So if, like a council 20 years from now was looking at ending the URA, you'd have to have a lot of cash saved up to be able to pay for the years 21 through 35 on the debt payment to be able to make the full benefit of that tax increment, right?
And I would believe, and somebody can interrupt me, the next URA would have to have that in its plan as well.
Or you just have one big final cash payment out of the URA if you have the money on hand, right?
Yeah, typically at the end, you do try and close up some projects, but I don't know if it'll have that dollar amount to pay off all the debt at that point.
So next project, WA 6360, this is our small main replacement program. This one truly is a sinking fund where we allocate between 100 to 150,000 each year to be able to go out and replace a lot of small mains. Back in the day, a lot of water mains were installed in 2-inch and 4-inch size. Our minimum size now is 8-inch. That builds out the grid, makes it more robust, allows us to put fire hydrants pretty much anywhere and be able to provide those. This project does a lot of good work out in the city. Okay. WA 6362. This is our Redwood Highway looping. This is another very important project. We keep trying to get it over the finish line, but we are trying to focus on the water treatment plant. It will install 9,700 linear feet of 16-inch water line along Redwood Highway. This will complete 2 major loops out there, which will really build the grid in the Redwood area, which is where the fastest growing area is. We are trying very hard to get a congressional appropriation. We needed about an additional $3 million to get this project over the finish line.
Josh?
2 questions. So one on the previous, just to confirm. So you had crossed off a couple things on page 64, the capital construction. Those have been completed. Is that why that got crossed off? They weren't removed from the list?
Yep, they were finished.
Correct.
Yep.
Perfect. And then on the Redwood looping, so is there, I remember correctly, there wasn't even a loop out there. Have you already completed one loop, now you're going for a second? Is that what this is?
No, it'll actually just tie across in 2 separate locations. So there's still one area that if one pipe breaks, there's an issue, but this one will complete 2 additional. So that gives us a lot more flexibility that if there's a break, we have a lot of ways around. Yep.
Josh?
Oh.
Sorry, Rick.
So Jason, the reason for the 16-inch line is that if something happened to the other line, this has the full capacity to service the area? Whereas if it was just...
And more than that, there's actually, in the master plan, the need for a future reservoir out there, somewhere. But we know it'll be that direction, so this will help get that water out there in that future.
And I know, of course, buying the pipe originally and putting it in the ground is the most expensive price. So downsizing the size isn't going to really...
It'll change the price a lot. The difference in cost between an 8 and a 16 is not half, it's a lot. It's a big difference, so it would be a lot cheaper. But again, if you have to come back and put it in larger later, then you're paying for it twice. So it really does make sense to go ahead and spend a little bit more upfront, knowing that that other tank is going to have to be built.
Okay, thank you.
Wastewater. Pages 210 to 225 in the big book.
Sorry, I'm going to ask one quick question. So if this is a congressional project, are we needing a earmark from the feds for this specifically? And if so, are we working through our US senators or congressmen or association?
Both. We've been working with Merkley and Wyden's offices. We missed out on it last year. We'll try again. We also are working through the state of Oregon, hopefully, with Juncker to try and get an appropriation. But this one was targeted to the federal project.
Okay.
Wastewater. So this program, as you would imagine, conveys and treats all the wastewater collected in Grants Pass and the Redwood area. It monitors all of our SIUs, and that's a significant industrial user, with our industrial pretreatment program. Maintains our collection system, pump, lift stations, and piping systems. We have 5 pump/lift station. I'll talk about the difference in a second, with 11 pumps ranging in size from 100 to 150 gallons per minute, and well over 174 miles of piping. Handles our customer service, which is our overflows, billing questions, service complaints, odors, et cetera. The FTEs for this is 5.8 on our collection side and 8 on the treatment side. The reason pump/lift, so sewer is a funny animal. Generally, you don't pump it. You will lift it up and let it go by gravity again. So we have several lift stations and only a couple of pump stations. So the pump station would be like Redwood, where we pump it all the way to across the pedestrian bridge. So that's a big lift. That's a pump, and it's a force main system. And then it goes by gravity to the plant from there.
Rick?
Jason, you indicated 100 to 150 gallons per minute, but the slide says 1,500, so that's a typo.
I meant to say 1,500, sorry.
It is 1,500?
Yes.
Okay.
There's some big pumps out there.
I was going to say, that's quite substantial. Thank you.
You know us, we don't do anything small. So overall program budget, if we look at our collections, it is up at 111,000, 317 at the treatment, and we'll talk about the specific reasons why that is. Our general program ops is up, but that's because of our capital transfers. And then our capital construction, again, we're just accumulating cash for future projects. And our debt service is holding steady. On the revenue side, we're predicting our revenues to be up. We underestimated last year, so we're going to collect a little bit more. That's why it looks like such a large jump for the next year. I'm sorry, that was the fund balance. We just came in a little bit under. We're not estimating a huge increase on the sewer fees. That's actually only a modest increase, about 600,000. And then absolutely capital construction. There's a lot of work getting done out there. We've got quite a few projects that are going, and especially around the M, and we want to get in and out of A Street, which we'll look at that a little bit more again. So looking at wastewater collection, this is the group that is out there making sure that the pipes are clean, that they're structurally sound, and that wastewater can make it to the treatment plant without leaking out. We're showing about a $99,000 increase in personnel costs, but everywhere else it's very, very flat. And that is related to a change mostly in people coming in through their steps, and then also the change in the superintendent. Almost all personnel services, sorry, sir.
Sorry, Joel.
So I appreciate you going through this in a timely manner. Sorry to slow you down a little bit.
Nope, not at all.
So I was wondering, when you pay off debt, do we pay that off monthly or yearly, or how do we do that?
Pay that off.
Our debt service. Do we have
Debt,
monthly pay?
annually, right?
It's twice, semi-annually.
Semi-annually.
So did we ever consider trying to do it annually and just and move it up? The same amount of money, but we just pay it all at once at the beginning of the year?
I don't know, again, that contract was settled in 2017, 2018. I don't know if that was an option to do an annual.
Okay.
Most debt services that I'm used to are semi-annual,
Right.
where there is a principal payment only once a year, but you have 2 interest payments.
If we have the resources, and we probably need to find that out. It would make a small difference in interest, but over time it would pay off.
I know a lot of them, I don't know that they allow us to, can they? You have to renegotiate those fees,
Yeah.
but it could be looked at.
So you can't pay it off early, is what you're saying?
there's that potential too. Also with the refinancing at this point, it may not be advantageous for us to refinance with current rates.
Well, I wouldn't advocate refinancing. I would just advocate making both payments at the beginning of the year and not making the other one 6 months later.
Yeah, I can't answer. We'll look into it. So wastewater treatment operations budget, about 242,000 increase in personnel services, 86,000 in contractual and professional services. And that, again, largely is power at the wastewater treatment plant. This is another one that it is almost exclusively contractual and personnel related. There's not a lot of chemical or material handling. And the contractual covers things like power, chemicals, vehicles, everything non-personnel related. So the reason that this one is so high, that we saw a big jump in personnel, it is not a change in staffing. We are overfilling though for 4 months, which is a departure for us. We traditionally don't do that. We have 2 key retirements in that department this year, within 4 months of each other. So we are trying to get a person into that position, absorb all that information that we can get before we lose that key resource. So it does mean that we are overstaffed temporarily, and I think it is an investment well worth the extra money. And then additional, there are payouts to both of those retirees for their accruals. And again, the power is, again, making sure that we're covered for any Pacific Power increase that could happen. Debt service is going to pay off in 2038. We've got the schedule. The entire schedule is actually in Appendix P of your book on page 337. All of our debt schedules are in there. And this was for the last expansion, which was pretty major. We added quite a bit of capacity at the treatment plant. Pretty successful project. I know Gary and the team speak very, very highly. And then we did just complete a project there that we didn't have to finance. We were able to pay cash, which was the conversion of our digester heat exchanger to from natural gas to sewer gas. And instantly, we've been saving about $25,000 a year by not using natural gas anymore. Pretty amazing. And it worked right out of the gate. It was really funny because Vista showed up like 3 months later to check the gas meter because they thought it actually had broken. I'm not sure how they missed the memo that we were going off of natural gas. So it was kind of interesting.
So, again, so we're paying the debt through fiscal 38, how long is the asset expected to last for?
The assets?
Yeah.
Oh, those are much longer, probably, again, 80 to 100 years on those assets. Because they're tanks for the most part. There's some mechanical change-outs that'll have to happen in between, replace a motor or bearings or things like that, but the physical structures are 100 years.
Yeah, so I guess just probably more for those of us in here, my same principle applies. Like, the asset's going to be there operating for that long. We're not matching the maturity of the debt to it. And by paying early, we're putting off other capital projects. And we seem to be in a big deferred maintenance lag on capital reinvestment. And like, if we did extend the maturity, we'd have more cash on hand, ostensibly, granted, to do things advantageously like your digester to get us off of operating expense. I'm
looking at JC. He's kind of the debt guy. Sorry, JC.
No, I'm trying to think. I don't think that there's something I want to say where there's a 30-year cap in debt service, but I'm not 100%, like
even
not
with
even
something
25%.
like as stable as people have to have their sewage disposed of over time, like human beings are going to continue to be human beings. Like the community's need for sewage is never going to go away.
I totally understand where you're getting from, but with my third city, all taking out loans for various projects, I haven't seen anything longer than 30 years.
Could you do something with like a balloon payment in the final year and just depend on rolling over the debt?
You could, but that's also taking the gamble of potentially the rate at that point in time too. So, I mean, if we all could have locked in a few years ago when the rates were nothing, yeah, sign me up.
General program ops. Again, from the wastewater standpoint, this is where our contract, or the postage is handled and our customer service charges. They all pay a pro rata share to Kimberly and her group for all the great work that they do for us down there. And it's also where our transfers out happen. And this year, we're able to transfer 3.6 million, and that was by some underspend, so we ended up with a higher fund balance at the end of the year, which allowed us to transfer more to capital this year. Capital, this is where the fun gets done. So this is Spalding Industrial Parks, SE 6200. This is one of those weird ones. There was also an LB project, which was a Spalding project in your LBs that Aaron went, I don't know if it actually would have got covered because we closed it. And so there were two projects that were doing almost exactly the same thing, but coming from two different funding sources. It didn't make sense. So we basically have taken the funding from the URA, added it to this project. And so we are asking for an additional $250,000 in wastewater capital, $255,000, which was the money that was allocated from the URA to the project. And we're actually done with preliminary design. I think we're looking pretty good. I think we're on design revision. It's a challenging area to serve. But we've got some plans. We've talked with all of the adjacent property owners that are affected, and they're willing to allow us to put the line where it needs to go, which is great. So this project is going to move forward.
Valerie?
And so my question is, I know there was one point where how far does it go? Because there's like one area on East Jones Creek or whatever. So how far are we taking the infrastructure?
So it is a phased project. It will cross the creek eventually. I don't think we're going to do that in round one, right? Hard to say if we hit first. But we were also going to pump to the south. Now we're going to pump back to the north. It will end up serving everything on the east of the creek right there, but it won't go up, and I'm going to get the name wrong. What's the street that goes to the north? Ament Road. It won't go up that very far. Just right there within the industrial park area.
Trip?
And
So it's great that the property owners are fine with where we're going to put the infrastructure. Are they contributing anything to the investment?
not yet. They will when they connect. There's connection fees. But right now, the one that's looking at developing doesn't need this pipe to connect, if that makes sense. He can actually be served off of the system that's already there. Council had made the policy decision through URA funds to help incentivize this area to get those industrial customers, maybe get somebody to come in. If the industrial customer has to pay 100% of the fee, they may choose to go elsewhere. So the intent is to have the city pay for as much as possible, potentially advance financing some and maybe getting some back later, but to be able to spur some development to bring some jobs in.
Do we have a sense of how the fees might compare to the value that the property owners are going to see from all of a sudden having a much more marketable piece of land?
I do not. I apologize. That's not my area.
I mean, we are, in essence, making a bet that industrial development is going to be beneficial in a world that's deindustrializing, and the property owners out there are going to are just left with some dirt if it weren't for $5 million of the taxpayers' money, or the ratepayers' money in this case. Well, some of the taxpayers too, right? And the URA increment's only on assessed value, which can go up 3% per year as opposed to the market value.
Yep. Anything else on this
Josh.
one?
So this is designated industrial at the current moment, but it conceivably, and I know that there's some stuff in the dirt and other things that may stop it, but you could redesign it for commercial, you could redesign it for other, or is it just industrial?
I wish Brad was here because he could answer this better. It is industrial. We have very little industrial land. My guess is you could not rezone this property.
So, question. Yeah, so my understanding is that the land use planning regs require us to have a certain amount of industrial land set aside.
Yep.
But is there any requirement that once we've identified industrial land, put it in the OGB, we ever have to like put the infrastructure in a certain period of time? Or can we just sit there and let it land bank under the theory that no one's actually going to want to have manufacturing this far from anything?
There's no requirement for that, and we do have to keep that as industrial land unless you did some kind of industrial land exchange. We identified new industrial land somewhere and exchange that, we still have to keep that percentage there. But there isn't anything stating that once you have industrial land that you have to have infrastructure within a certain amount of time.
Are there any rules around the pitch of the land that has to be industrial land?
Yeah, you're bringing up a good point, and your point is just that we do not have highly marketable industrial land. We have a lot of constraints with industrial land, and it's going to be hard to compete with any other industrial land in the Southern Oregon region.
Which is part of the reason why I'm bringing this up, because if we don't really have industrial land, and I'd make an argument it's so small, it's going to be really hard to find people to take it, that maybe we want to look at changing this up. So, just saying. That makes this investment actually really good long-term, so that's why I'm pointing it out.
Valerie?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I know SoReady has trying to work, and the big thing they're always saying is you have to have something shovel-ready. People don't even look unless you have something that's ready to look for. And they've also said there are people within our own region who are looking just to get bigger and need more space. So I think, what we've seen through our years of trying to incentivize and get development out there, it's just the same thing. You have to be shovel-ready to even expect anybody to look at it. So that's why the investment is being made.
SE 6374, this is on page 85. This is a project that we have been working on for a little bit, but we do need to evaluate and find a secondary route for the sewage that we pump back from the Redwood area. At some point, we are going to run out of capacity in that line, and we really can't install a larger line on the same route. It just isn't feasible. And to be more resilient, we really need a secondary river crossing anyway. So one of that was looking at it with the combination of the bike crossing, or do we bore under the river, or there's just a myriad of options. But we really need to keep this project moving forward to find that secondary route. We're asking for an additional allocation of $250,000 in wastewater capital. Total project is, we're saying 5, but that really is a guesstimate at this point. Okay. SE 6375, this is our collection system maintenance and repair project, very similar to the storm drain emergency repair project. It is a sinking fund where we retain dollars for projects that have to be, you have to mobilize and get them done now. As you can imagine with the wastewater pipe, if you find a structural deficiency, you can't wait a year to get that fixed. You have to get in, get it dug up, get it repaired, and get that sewage flowing again. It's very critical, and so we leave a fair amount of money in this project, and we do probably 3 or 4 projects a year out of this fund. Okay. Mill Street sewer replacement. Sorry, was there a question? Okay, Mill Street sewer replacement. This is SE 6414, page 87 of your capital book. And this project is going to replace the existing system with larger pipes, and it's really in conjunction. The first piece is going to get done with the A Street reconstruction. That whole basin drains over through Mill Street and makes this really weird, funky turn over at Mill and J, and then ends up over on M Street heading to the wastewater plant. So it's a large-scale project. It's got a lot of little bottlenecks in it that we're hoping to alleviate with this project. We're asking for an additional $550,000 in wastewater capital plus $450,000 of wastewater SDCs. And I didn't say it earlier, any of the projects that are including SDCs are capacity related projects. So system development charges have a very, very specific use. We cannot use them just to replace a piece of pipe, a 12-inch piece of pipe with a 12-inch piece of pipe. They have to somehow relate to enhanced capacity. They also are projects that have to be clearly identified in our sewer master plan or our water master plans as a capacity-related project. And for the project like this, it may only be that 50% of that project is SDC eligible. And so anytime we're looking at that, that's the reason why. SE 6423, this is the water restoration plant UV disinfection replacement. As you can imagine, wastewater treatment plants are very, very expensive. We put this project on the books a few years ago, and we have 2 UV light systems, and that's how we do all of our disinfection for the wastewater that's returned to the Rogue River. One of those systems now is well over 20 years old and has got to be replaced. It is running on a wing and a prayer. The guys do a great job. It is our emergency backup. What I mean by that is we have a primary UV, and when it goes down, it's a manual where people are turning switches on and cranking the power up to full. It does not run in auto. It will not self-start, and you hope to keep it running. So it needs to be replaced. We're estimating about 2.2 million. We did revise that from 200,000, and I know that that looks like a big jump, but we just put a number in the very first year. We hadn't actually gone out and started to do cost estimating. There's quite a bit of construction work that has to be done with the channel. We can't buy a unit off the shelf and just drop it in. We have to get something either manufactured exactly for the channel we have, or we have to take the channel out and reconfigure it.
Josh?
So if we have a hamster basically running our backup here, like, how long is it going to take to replace this?
It's a couple years. We're trying to build funds now. We'll get the design done, and my guess is in next fiscal year, you'll see a bigger ask for this project to be able to get it funded.
Okay, and then do we have like dedicated funds that we think we can do this, or is this going to be an ask to the GF?
No, these will all be wastewater funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trip?
So, this is kind of emblematic of kind of a series of projects where, we open a project, we start doing some estimating,
Yep.
and then we finally get a sense of how much it's going to cost.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's some just costs involved that hit the operating budgets in terms of like, okay, we have staff on hand who's identifying the need for what we need to roll into a capital budget. And this is, once we have that need identified, this is the most clearest way of keeping track of all the costs of the project itself. When I see like $200,000 of study leading to $2 million of investment, I guess my question is like, is there a more efficient cost equivalent to take the $200,000 worth of study and just make it part of our general operating, considering the number of things we need to study over time?
Yeah, and this one is a complicated one. I think this one, the 200,000 was we were going to rebuild it because we were told, oh yeah, we can just rebuild this thing. And turns out that that was not the case, that it is a full reconstruct. And that was very unfortunate. That's why the big jump.
Let's just, for the sake of the hypothetical, say that it wasn't that, but we had to like go hire a consultant for $200K to tell us what we needed to do. It seems to be a trend in a lot of these capital projects.
That's like, about how they operate, Yeah,
I mean, is management sense that if we had the funds available operationally, we might be able to find a lower cost equilibrium by moving some of those studies into the departments and actual people on the city payroll?
We do it both ways. I mean, we can start out with a larger, the estimated total project cost, we can start out with a larger number to begin with. But almost all of our projects kind of start, as you just said, evolve that direction. Oftentimes we will do the study ahead of time, pay for that out of our operating funds through our consultants, and then we'll create the project once and get it done. It happens both ways, but unfortunately some of these, especially where you're accumulating funds and go for years, you may end up with multiple changes like this. And I don't know that the estimated cost ever figures into your accounting, right? It really is just a number that's hanging out there. It really is those numbers that we allocate.
That is correct. And so any of those studies or things that we do that go towards the capital construction are capitalizable. So we try and start them in a project, and then wherever the project leads us, we'll end up capitalizing that as well.
Rick?
So Jason, I know the UV is part of improving the water before it goes back into the river. The city of Silverton pumps high and then they go through different, I think 3 different ponds for cooling, and then they have vegetation in there. Do you know if that vegetation takes care of the need for UV?
I don't think it does. I know that they are using that for cooling. They are
Right.
using it for like nitrate and nitrate removal, phosphorus also removal. And I want to say we retained an easement. We didn't retain any of the property down on the 250 acres, did we? We tried to carve out a place because that is a good future option for us to pump through, but then you need quite a bit of land for that type of treatment, tertiary.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The average daily flow out of the wastewater plant, I want to say, is about 3 million gallons. That's a not insignificant amount of water to be running somewhere. So. M Street sewer capacity enhancement. This is the second or third phase we have heard about. The first piece is in A Street. Second place was that Mill Street project, and now this is the M Street project. It's like the #1 project in the sewer master plan, or really close to it. And this is a new project. It's page 90 in your capital book. About $2 million in wastewater capital and $600,000 in wastewater system development charges. Again, estimated cost, and that is an estimate at about $3 million. This is also a new project. This is for the water restoration plant secondary clarifier refurbishment. So the water restoration plant, one of the last processes before it hits disinfection is secondary clarification. That's where the water goes in, we settle out the last of the solids, the water overflows from there and heads off to the UV and then to the river. We have 3 secondary clarifiers, one of which is very new, 2 of which are probably from the 1970s with very, very minimal modifications. They are in dire need of some refurbishment. This project is intended to refurbish those. We did get an estimate from a contractor 3-4 years ago. This number is probably a little low, I'm just going to warn you, but about $400,000 to refurbish them, and that involves, recoating the sides and updating some of the mechanical systems. Excellent. And that means that Wade gets to get up. Oops, sorry.
Question, just more broadly, a couple broader questions. So we've mentioned a couple times, or it's my understanding, that the projects, these capital projects have been identified in like the transportation master plan and the sewer master plan and all that sort of stuff. Yet I don't see any capital projects for the master plans themselves, and I'm guessing those are pretty expensive and
They are.
occur in a capital-ish timeframe, like 10 years or so.
Yeah, we update them about every 10 years, and we just readopted all of the master plans in 2016-17. I think the wastewater plant one is the oldest at 2014, so it'll be coming up, and we're just completing the last round of projects in that, which includes the secondary clarifiers. And so the reason that we say that they have to be eligible, that's mostly for SDCs. The master plans, though, are also used just for planning which projects are there.
So, been completely different than that. Like,
Yep.
we've talked a lot about the utilities, we've talked about deferred maintenance, trying to catch up with capital projects, all this sort of stuff, and then expanding the system. So if we just take the average undeveloped parcel in the city limits, or in the UGB probably more particularly, is it like managing sense that when we pay the cost of providing that parcel with infrastructure, that the cash flows back in terms of SDCs that the developers are going to pay, the utility rates that whoever ends up using what's developed on that parcel are going to pay over time, and there's very limited general fund support for anything in the utilities world, so like that's not coming. Do we get a sense of are we digging ourselves into a deeper hole, or are we making the situation better by expanding the utility?
In general, we do not expand the utilities, if that helps ease your mind. In general, we're not out there running new water lines. Now, I know we've talked about a couple. We've talked about a couple that are very specific that complete loops or in the Spalding area. But for most residential and most commercial areas, it is up to the developers and the property owners to orderly extend that as the development moves out. especially into the UGB. Now, council has been considering policy that does move those lines out to help accelerate housing development, but for the most part, we do not extend water mains to get new customers.
And so then like the kind of intuitive next question would be, then is our general sense that the SDCs pay for the infrastructure that we're extending?
So no. Again, council, when they looked at the system development charges, and that takes in a component of what we've already built, plus what we have to build for the future, elected to undercharge for those system development charges to help, again, facilitate ongoing development.
In theory, development pays for itself.
Yep.
And we have infrastructure associated with special fees, system development charges, et cetera, to cover the cost of that, or we do reimbursement districts or local improvement district to pay for these things. That's in theory, and with regards to mechanisms in place to collect that, we have that. However, there is also an affordability index, incentive index, et cetera. So it's not just the city of Grants Pass, but there are multiple municipalities throughout the state of Oregon that undercharge that capacity that they have to have development fully pay for itself in different ways, and it's unique to each community.
Right, I mean, yeah, in theory, development should pay for itself, but like also in theory, there's a really great case for not charging SDCs and just running enough of a general fund balance that you can make that investment, because the utilities, the property tax from the value will all come back and actually make a more profitable city, right?
Well, the one correction I'd say, it wouldn't be general fund, it would be an increase in your utility fee to cover the subsidization of lowering your SDCs.
Or just that if we punch in a street, put sewer and water in, if that property goes from undeveloped to developed.
Yes.
And the tax base change.
Yes.
And we were running enough of a general fund balance, there'd be a great argument for saying, hey, if we actually do front the money for this infrastructure investment, it comes back to us in the form of property taxes in the general fund, and therefore there should be a flow from the general fund into the utilities.
And so your property taxes, though, go to fund general fund operations, not your utility. So your utility ends up losing in the end. So what you do is, if you do front load infrastructure, the city creates a reimbursement district associated with that, to where ultimately we may be front loading infrastructure, but when they hook in, they will help pay their fair share of that development that the city front loaded for it to be readily accessible to development. And that's done through the utility fees, not through general fund.
Yeah.
Because property taxes coming in is not sufficient, due to Measure 5 and Measure 50, to fully fund not only general fund operations like parks, community development, rec, police, fire, and water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation. Property taxes does not have the ability to pay for all those services. So we have those enterprise funds, and we have funding mechanisms to help development pay for its own self through the utility fund fees.
Yes. I mean, that's the accounting of it, and you're right, Measure 5, Measure 55 severely constrain that. But it's still the case that we're not collecting enough in the utilities to pay for the capital base as it continues to increase.
That is correct. There has been policies that have established that we are incentivizing development at a cost, and ultimately the cost comes at the cost of a future ratepayer, because at some point in time, we won't have enough SDC fund, or we won't have enough fund, so we'll have to incorporate that into a transfer of capital from the user fee.
Right, and I guess your incentivizing point is what I'm trying to get at, because in my mind, the incentive is more to develop the property and increase the tax base. Just the accounting in here and in the city's financial reports, it's clearly not the case that we have any capacity at all to move funds out of the general fund for anything other than what we're spending it on now. And if the incentives we're giving people to develop, return to positive ROI for the city, we wouldn't be extending the useful life of assets from 120 to 140 years, and we would have something like general fund capacity to rethink how system development charges, for example, are levied.
Yeah, and that's where you put in, it's not just fully, when it comes to a council perspective, it's not fully just, your ROI is not just a financial black and white, it's livability, it's how much housing do we need, what type of housing, how do we incentivize different things, it's a quality of life issue also associated with, not just a financial issue.
Wade?
Hello, good evening. I don't think I introduced myself earlier. My name is Wade Elliott. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director, and Jason needed a break, so he gave me 3 token slides in the middle, so bear with me. So one of the many divisions that we take care of is the Solid Waste Fund, and in this case, it is the Merlin landfill, which is a decommissioned landfill that we are going to own forever. So we take care of that. So right now, this is for the Solid Waste Agency. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. But anyways, this is mostly handled through the Solid Waste Agency. The Merlin landfill is done and is in the post-closure care period. So what we do is we go out there and we do groundwater monitoring to make sure that some of the landfill contamination is receding and naturally attenuating as it should be. So the Merlin landfill is a historic landfill that didn't have a liner on the bottom. Of course, new landfills have a liner. All of what leaches out of the waste would be collected into a leachate system. But the Merlin landfill didn't have that. And so all those leachates went into the ground and created a contamination plume, which we monitor to make sure that it's not migrating further away from the site than it is projected to. So this, right now, the trends have been getting much better over the years, to the point where we've been able to reduce our sampling of the groundwater to once a year. It used to be about 4 times a year, probably more at the height right after closure, but it is naturally attenuating and getting better to where DEQ is letting us do it less. So this fund also takes care of the maintenance of the landfill cover. So there is a top cover on the landfill, and then it's got some fill soil on top of it, grass, and then there's also a surrounding property of 420 acres, I believe, that we take care of. We do some thinning of the forest and the understory out there. We take care of little miscellaneous items like mice and voles that we need to keep under control to make sure that they don't burrow into the landfill cap, things like that. So it's really a small portion of what we do to make sure that the landfill is in compliance. Right now, the only people that are actually dedicated to this fund is 5% of the urban forester, and that is to make sure that the forest stewardship plan is enacted. You'll see that everything's red here. It's one of the few that you guys will probably see as you're going through the budget process. And this is reflected by the fact that we were able to reduce our sampling frequency to once a year. So those are all the savings that you see. And personnel services went up a little bit. Of course, that's 5% of the urban forester. And then materials and supplies and contractual services went down. Here you'll see the post-closure care portion of it went down. Most of that, like contractual professional services, we don't do the sampling ourselves. We hire somebody to do that. And the same thing goes for contingency. That went down a little bit as we are drawing down that ending fund balance. And indirect charges went up slightly, as well as the contingencies for the general program operations, which is on page 232. So some efficiencies, which I think I already kind of jumped ahead on, but we have been able to reduce the work that we're doing out there. Currently, the wastewater treatment staff facility at the WRP should have been the water restoration plant, not the other plant. They take care of this, and they have historically for a long time. So they're the ones that do all the maintenance out there, coordinate some of the forest clearing operations. Okay, and then on to support services, which would be Jason.
Okay.
Trip?
So great that we're able to reduce sampling and save money. Do we sample at the same time every year? Do we sample? Is there any sort of seasonality out there that we might be missing by sampling that infrequently?
Yeah, so historically it was 4 times a year, and then we were able to determine that we only needed to do it in the spring and fall. One would be when your groundwater table is at its highest, and the other is when it's at its lowest. And then this is all done with the oversight of the DEQ. So anyways, now we're down to 1 sampling per year, which is when the contaminants that are in the water quality are at their highest historically.
First, I need to do an ex parte report. The council knows I'm with the county. And so when I see this, I'm wondering, how does the county's responsibility for the landfill versus the city and any liability for issues, how does that work?
So I'm not exactly sure where it happened, but somewhere along the line, the city of Grants Pass took sole responsibility for the Merlin landfill, and Josephine County took responsibility for Kirby and Marlson lagoons. I'm guessing that there was some kind of mutual agreement during that time, so there is no liability to Josephine County for the Merlin landfill. And Wade didn't mention it, but this year also we are switching our landfill consultant, Eric Tuppen, who has been amazing for us over the last decade? Maybe more. Has finally retired. We tried to get him to stay on as the only client ever, but he said no, retirement was far more important to him, so he did retire. We did hire somebody that he knows and feels very comfortable with through a competitive process. But the work that he did and working so closely with DEQ, we got rid of our air quality permit, which is almost unheard of for a landfill as well as all of our groundwater sampling, getting that reduced, and it's still safe, and it's still it's been pretty amazing. We're very happy with Eric's performance, and I know he'll never hear this, but he's done amazing things for Grants Pass. We're grateful. So support services, we're in the home stretch here. This is where all of the ancillary services related to public works reside. It's our public works administration budget, engineering, our facility management, and facilities replacement, which is a new program this year, and garage operations and our equipment replacement fund. And I noticed now that there was another bullet there, and obviously I backspaced out of it, like between facilities management and replacement, so it looked like garage, but whatever. So starting at Public Works Administration, this is where Wade and I reside, and it provides the physical support for management and capital program. It is myself, Wade, Kira, our business operations supervisor, our department support tech who handles all the day-to-day, getting the bills paid, answering the phones, getting calls routed, and our entire GIS system. Which is made up of a coordinator and a GIS technician, 1 and 2, with a recommended budget which includes 7.5 FTE. Now, I do want to note, I'm going to jump ahead and then fall back. This budget does represent an increase in 1 FTE, but it is a net decrease in the engineering budget. So that's why when Aaron said there's no new FTEs, we actually eliminated a position in engineering, but not really eliminated, we just reallocated them from engineering to GIS. And the reason for that is the work that they were doing was mostly GIS related. While they would do some engineering related work and take some survey points and help out the surveyor, the bulk of the time they were spending was taking assets from CAD and putting them into the GIS system, which really does fit better there. So we removed that, we reallocated that position from engineering to GIS, or we're asking for that in this budget. So the budget's pretty flat. We are showing an increase in the beginning balance, but that's because of money that was coming back in to the program from closing out a couple of capital projects that had been running. Looking at the Public Works Administration, it is almost all personnel related. We are showing that an increase, and that's twofold. One is the increase of that FTE in this particular program. You'll see a corresponding decrease on the other side, but also just our staff are moving up through their steps through with the negotiated increases. Otherwise, the increases are all pretty moderate. And I covered that. Yep. Oh, I thought you were going to ask a question. I was just looking. Yes, sir. Mr. King.
So Jason, one of the things that, in the 24 budget and in the 25 budget, we got a contingency that we didn't have in 22 and 23, and the ending balance also goes up.
Which page are you on, sir?
256.
Thank you.
So we got a new contingency that we didn't have before, and the ending balance goes up, even with that contingency. There's got to be an explanation for that. I guess there's.
So if you look at FY '22, the ending balance is a combination of all of the unspent funds plus whatever was budgeted in contingency for that year. And then same thing for FY '23. Then this year, we're just showing the contingency of $426,000 in FY '24. When we get to the end of the year, we'll have a zero in that contingency line and probably a fund balance of, $500,000 or $600,000 in the ending fund balance. So it really is, it's not that they weren't there, but the contingency is there when we budget, but it turns into an ending fund balance when we close the year out.
Because you're looking at actual versus budget.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So, and then I'll just come behind Jason a little bit. The reason for the increase between 24 and 25 is he's going to start the beginning of the year higher than where he thought he was going to end the previous year.
Engineering division, also in support services, 258 to 260. This is Wade's program. These guys are the ones that are out there in the field inspecting all of our public works projects, not just our public works projects, but development-related public works projects. So a developer is putting in a water line. Wade's team is out there inspecting it, making sure it's installed to city standards before we take ownership of that asset. So funding for this is provided by fees for service and then direct and indirect charges. And what that means is they charge directly to the developer, plus we charge internally for that service, so to the other departments. Total recommended FTEs is 6, which is 1 down from the previous year. And this is treated almost like a separate fund, but it is basically an internal fund, so we bill out and recalculate each year. Fairly low dollars. And almost all of the fees come from internal and then what we charge to the development community.
Trip.
So what we charge to the community is engineering fees, or is that direct charges?
That would probably be engineering fees, is that correct? Wade? Yep. Engineering fees.
And the same is true of like the GIS fees and the other.
So GIS fees come from almost exclusively internal.
Okay.
Development doesn't pay much on that, a little bit through the engineering program, but we've been trying to clean that up to make it a little bit simpler to fund the program.
Yeah. Is your sense that the development community is using the GIS assets that we're providing?
Quite a bit, actually, yeah. I know that they do like us having the system available.
Mm-hmm. And then, so this kind of final question here would be, the engineering fees, like what kind of work are we doing that we're charging a developer for?
It really is inspecting and monitoring their construction process. You know, we have to make sure that that asset is installed to city standards. They're using the correct materials. They've installed it at the proper grades, that they've done all the clean taps, that we've come back and done all that. It really is just making sure that we are protected from poor workmanship.
So like a building inspector, but for the engineering parts of a development?
Yep. Yep. Everything between the right-of-way lines is where we function. So when we look at where those funds are allocated, it is, oh, I'm so sorry,
Sandy?
Candy, I missed you.
I just wanted to mention how even your ending contingencies are.
Yes.
Your rate setting is amazing. I'm very impressed.
Well, it's good when we can do it year after year. It's kind of we just reset the rate a little bit to make sure that we end with that fund balance of about 25 to 35%. So it works well.
Another question.
Sorry.
So the flip side of my question about developers using GIS, is your sense that the other city departments that are contributing, internal service charges to GIS, that they're making adequate use of our GIS resources?
I have to say, people come and visit us and they're amazed by how GIS-centric the city of Grants Pass is. All of the departments use GIS. I don't think it's installed on every machine in the city. Most people use it daily. I know that I'm in it almost all day long. It really is a benefit to everybody, and not only just from the research that you can do, but you can get a quick glance of where all those utilities are. So yeah, they get a lot of value from the GIS. This is where those funds are allocated. Again, super personnel heavy. It's all about people in this department, in the engineering group. A little bit of contractual, but that's paying for space in the building, vehicles, training, etc. Okay. Again, down 72,000, and again, this was that shift. I'm going to go backwards. Let me finish this slide, and then I'm going to go backwards. I forgot to say something. 72, and that's that decrease in that one FTE, which was reallocated, and the rest is pretty flat. I want to go back to the Public Works admin budget, and the reason is, I forgot to mention, we are showing an increase of a half an FTE in your budget book, but we are not filling that position. The intent of that position was, it's a higher level administrative position which was going to be responsible for help processing the payments from the water filtration plant. When we really get that project going, the bills that are going to come in are going to be on the order of several $1 million at a whack, and they're probably going to be about this thick as an itemized bill with all of the work that's been done, and that's going to take a lot of very specialized work. Since this budget was created, we've had more further conversations with our owner's agent. And they are going to be able to provide us with a person to do that work for us who will not actually sit at a city desk and be paid a city salary. We'll do that through a contractual arrangement through the project. And I just wanted to make a note of that we did show that position in there, but it will not be filled this next year.
So, from like an internal controls perspective, like how long ago did we know we weren't going to fill the position? Like relative to this budget being published for the public to see?
So when the budgets, this all happened pretty quick. So we thought that was the direction we were going to go. We haven't even finalized what that cost will look like through our owner's agent. Our owner's agent is Stantec Group, and they are acting as an extension of our staff for the administration of the project. So the intent was we would fill it at halfway through the year, so we weren't even going to be bringing it on board till about December of the upcoming year. Mm-hmm. But when we're going and creating the budget, this happened 4 months ago. It's just that personnel allocation is like the first step, so we just didn't have time to get it pulled out of the budget document.
4 months didn't give us enough time to change the personnel schedule when, like, in this
No, I
document?
want to say his change has happened recently as far as the removing it.
Yeah, the decision that we're going to contract that only happened in the last month, probably, okay. Just in conversations with our consultant. So we didn't have time to pull it out. They still had everything created, but we just wanted to let you know that, hey, it will not be a filled position. Facilities management, pages 261 to 265. This program is responsible for operating and maintaining all of the city-owned buildings and systems. Not all of the city-owned systems. We are currently not maintaining the public safety building and the 3 fire stations. They are following best practices and industry standards. I will say that the group that we have today with Guy and his team are amazing. The work that they're now able to do more proactively than reactively has really raised our building efficiency tremendously. Their work, if you look, is not really personnel, it's a lot of contractual. We contract out for all of our janitorial, security and alarm services, plumbers, electricians, HVAC, building fencing, you name it. It is much more cost effective for us to contract out a lot of those services. This group really does continue to evolve. If you recall, a few years ago, our council we underwent a PAVE that recommended quite a few changes. All of those changes have pretty much been implemented. We've implemented now asset management. We now have computerized maintenance management. We're now doing proactive maintenance as opposed to reactive maintenance. we've really changed how this group interfaces to its customers, which are the internal service customers. Looking at the cost, you can see that it's about 50% personnel, 50% contractual services, and overall the budget is very flat, with the transfer out being the big swing in the budget, lowering it out. We just didn't transfer any money out this year.
That's the question.
And facilities capital, this is a new program. So one of the other items that the PAVE report identified is we are not investing in our buildings, capital-wise, at all. And this program, Fund 835, which is a new fund for this year, if you approve it in the budget, it changes that. And what it does is it charges an additional square footage charge to our customers. And we're, started at 2 locations, and that is this building, the municipal building, and the city yard. And what that money does is it's held in trust for large capital improvements at those facilities, very similar to how we operate our equipment replacement fund. This will allow us to start to do those really large capital projects like the roof at this building. So the only reason that that project is able to move forward is because we're borrowing money. This implementation of this fee will allow us to pay back that loan. Without that, we would have to draw from the general fund or some other source. So we're really hopeful that this will move forward. We believe it is the right decision, and hopefully as general funds gets more stable, we can look at bringing in the rest of the city's buildings into this program. To be able to reinvest in our buildings, which are our largest capital assets above ground, except our reservoirs. So it starts quite modest. We're only collecting about $74,000 a year from the municipal complex, and that $444,000 is an artificially high number. I want you to know that next year that number will be low, but that's because we're closing a capital project that did a feasibility study for the city yard, and that money will be rolling back. We're rolling it into this fund for future capital. And then the loans or proceeds, that is actually the loan that we will be borrowing that will be going towards the roof on both this building and the municipal building. And then the money going out, so same thing.
Valerie.
Yeah, can you go back a slide? I just want to take a look at, no?
This is where the money's coming from. It's really just, and unfortunately this year it's kind of artificial because we have so much money coming in, both as a loan, the
Right.
$700,000, which is the largest chunk, and then on the city yard side, because we did the city yard master plan, which you guys approved a while back, that project closed with a pretty significant cash balance. So instead of returning that money to the individual, we put it all into their facility fund after talking to them.
Okay, I think it was before that, but you were taking a look at the police and the fire and that there was.
So we did look at those as part of the Meng project, but as of this time, because the general fund was so strapped, they did not have additional resources to participate in this program or to participate in having Guy and his team take on their maintenance of their facilities.
And so it's my understanding, because I think you mentioned that they're taking over the maintenance of their facilities through their budgeting. Is that correct?
They have been doing their own maintenance. The reason that I think that we really want to consider changing that is their policemen and firemen. They're not trained in building system operation and maintenance. While they can do it, you really want a police captain changing air filters on the roof? No, you want a skilled building technician to do that work.
So we'll be looking into that in the future, is that?
We will be, yeah. We were hoping to actually bring it forward this year, but the funding just didn't pencil out this year.
Okay, thank you.
Trip.
So what's the equation being used to allocate, like charge the different departments for the?
Yeah, so we're charging, I think it's $4 a square foot. What we're looking at is the overall capital asset, and we really started kind of small. We think it needs to be a little bit higher, to be real honest. But we worked our way backwards into what we knew we were going to have to borrow for the roof to be able to cover the loan payment.
Right, and so this is probably more of a JC question. Right, open up this new kind of internal service fund, right? And I mean, based on the way the past couple of years have gone, we're going to have periods of time where we're saving money in that fund to buy like a new roof. If a future council decides to stop treating things that way? Do we just refund the amounts in that fund back to the departments that paid them pro rata, or?
So that's a good question, and Jason is going to track it as such, so to where that he, in theory, could potentially do that if that were the case. And so that is always normally the plan. So we track even equipment replacement. It comes from fire. If for whatever reason council wanted to close our equipment replacement fund, those monies would go back to those areas.
Yeah. This one is a bit more challenging because, like in this building, we're collecting funds from general fund, a little bit from general fund. We're collecting it from public works. We're collecting it from building, from finance, from the admin fund. And so it gets a little bit more complicated. The city yard even more so because we have water, wastewater, and all of those. But the intent will be, we'll know what those dollars were and it would be returned pro rata to those if it was closed. So general fund would get back their share, water would get back their share. Yep.
And if there's any outstanding debt in the fund, would that be allocated out to all the departments pro rata too?
Yep, I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd have to figure that out, and I'm guessing we do some roundabout charge directly back to those departments.
Square footage. Yes,
Sandy.
Sandy.
So is this going to be is it a designated capital fund?
It
So it can
is.
only be used for capital, and you are going to collect?
Yeah. It could be a capital maintenance, say a large scale that all the HVAC had to be replaced, so it's $100,000. Anything that's outside of really the normal maintenance on a building, that's what Guy's Group does, is that normal maintenance. This is for that larger capital where, you know, a roof is something that you're just not planning for, or the eventual replacement of a building in its entirety.
It's kind of scary that you didn't have that, that you're just now starting this.
Yes.
Ditto. There are other areas probably that need some kind of fund like this that we have not tackled yet. And again, it has to do with trying to keep the dollars in operations where we can.
Yeah. But it was identified in those reports multiple times, and we are now saying it's critical. Let's get it done.
Tripp.
So borrow money in fiscal '25, we start paying it back in fiscal '26 with interest. Does the interest paid out of this fund, or is it paid out of a fund contributing to this fund?
So this is an internal loan. So there are some ORSs that coincide with that. It is a capital loan, so it has a maximum 10-year payback. And so we will calculate the interest as soon as the construction and the loan is done. And so there'll be even 10 payments from all of the parties involved, basically, to pay that back.
So garage operations, this is pages 271 to 276. And this is where Ari and his team take care of all of our vehicles. And Dave and Alicio out there, our mechanics, are probably the most skilled mechanics we've had. It's really awesome. I know I say that every year, but it really is. Total program has about a 4.0 FTE allocation, and that includes Donna, our office support. She's amazing at getting all the vehicles scheduled and getting the bills paid in and out, so we really appreciate that. This budget is very flat. We have done some restructuring to the rate, and what we do with this one is we charge out, it's a very frustrating budget to calculate. At the end of calendar year 23, we added up everything we paid in the calendar year, and then we bill that out in FY 25. So our revenues lag our expenses by 18 months. It makes it a little bit challenging. But the reason that we do that is because we can even out the payments to all of our departments that we serve. Whereas if they had a bigger or a smaller year and they're having to pay us at the end of each service, they could have a really huge spike that they didn't anticipate, and it gets covered up. But by doing this, they're able to smooth out their payments. It works out really, really well. But from a budgeting standpoint, it's always a challenge because like a couple of years ago when fuel, well, it's still up, but when it went way, way up, Ari and the team were pretty much scrambling, trying to make sure that we could bring the budget in on target. I think we ended up making a revision that year also when fuel and tires went up at the same time. So it does work out really well for us. We did make a few adjustments to how we're billing out the departments, but it's still under that same period. So it also, you'll see that the fund balances stay very, very flat, or the contingencies.
Sorry, Joel?
So I had a question. Other agencies, when they do that, they have what they call FOR rates, which are monthly rates, like per vehicle.
Yep.
That also includes the replacement costs of that vehicle. Have we considered that with this?
It's on the next couple slides. We have that as well.
Okay.
But yes, we do. So there is a flat monthly fee just for the privilege of owning that vehicle and to help to keep the shop afloat. So one of the things that we do, and I think it's probably on the next slide, it really is monitoring the cost of the shop. And we know that we're more expensive than a commercial shop, but what that buys you is a very technically trained mechanics who can work on very technical vehicles with the certifications to ensure that we're in compliance with ISO so we can work on a fire truck, right, without losing a rating. We can work on a police vehicle now, which is more computer than vehicle, the amount of equipment that goes into those. Some of the technical equipment like the CCTV vans that we're running. So you're paying for a little bit of a skilled and the ability to drive in and get service on the same day, which is almost impossible if we have a contract with any shop in the field. So we know that we're there, but we also balance that every year, and we keep evaluating that because at some point it could be that we can't get the mechanics to work on the vehicles, or we have to charge a rate that we just can't afford to back to our users. So we keep a really close eye on that. But there is a monthly fee both for the privilege of using the shop and for the replacement.
Joel?
I'll be quick. So have we considered at all consolidating with neighbor organizations that do the same thing? So like Medford does the same thing, Rogue River does the same thing, the county does the same thing. Have we
did look
considered
at partnering-
consolidation, and would that save us money?
When we initially talked to the county a couple years ago, that we explored this once before, they didn't have the capacity in the shop, bay space, to take on that many additional vehicles. We also questioned Medford as our backup, and they will back us up in an absolute emergency, but as a regular course of action, no. So, but we'll keep evaluating and asking those questions.
Rick?
I want to compliment you. I don't know how long ago you were able to gain an employee from Pierce Arrow, and that was very unheard of to have in-house service like you do.
Well, Dave is an amazing, I don't think he worked necessarily at Pierce, but he does work magic with the fire trucks. So magic, he's a keeper, so.
Trip?
So the keeping skilled workers bullet points, I'm assuming workers are leaving for more money with either a contractor that would provide these same services or with a municipality, because it's not like they're going down to like a generic gas station mechanic role, the way you described the role, right?
No, we've been very fortunate. This team has been together now for 4 or 5 years. Before that, we were losing them pretty quickly. We do pay pretty well for a mechanic job, and the hours are pretty decent. But we're at a point now where one of our employees he's probably going to retire in a few years, and so we're going to be faced with that challenge. That's why we continually evaluate those external options. But yeah, I'm going to knock on wood because I don't want to jinx somebody leaving. So
it might be more accurate finding skilled workers when they turn over than keeping them?
I think finding is going to be a much better term for that.
Okay. Just because your comment about like making sure that we're not charging the departments too much, like I got to imagine that somebody who's qualified to work on a fire truck is going to either go to a municipality who's funded enough to pay for it or go to a contractor who's going to charge whatever the market rate is. And I don't see us being able to lower that cost.
No.
And if our workers are turning over because of pay, that's a much different scenario than if they're turning over because of retirement.
I would never actually advocate lowering our employee. I think our mechanics are actually underpaid if you look at the shop rate. And the reason that they stay is we're a great place to be. Grants Pass is a great place to work. And so I think when they move on, it is going to be a challenge to find the replacements. And at that point, we may have to evaluate shop closing. I hope not. I'm hoping a unicorn is going to pop out of the woods just like it did the last time, and we're going to be able to take the reins and go, yes, we can keep working on our fire trucks and some of the other apparatus. So the next is the equipment replacement. So we, very similarly to what we just did with the building, we've been doing with the equipment replacement for years. As soon as we buy a vehicle and we paid cash for that vehicle, we start making payments on the next one. And so we put these into a dedicated fund. Each vehicle is tracked independently in our financial system, and each vehicle accrues interest based on its cash balance. I mean, it really is a great system. And by the time that vehicle needs to be replaced, it is fully funded or nearly fully funded, and we're able to go buy that one and start paying for the next one, which is the where we really want to get to with our buildings, but it works really well in the equipment replacement side.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm just asking, I know with, in the last couple of years when we made budget cuts, that we had hit into
Yes.
the replacement. So is this refunding and putting that full funding back into the replacement fund?
It did, and I was surprised because Chief Hensman and Hyatt and Joe Hyatt, neither one complained nearly as much as I thought they were going to complain, because I increased it back to where we should have been, and we had cut it 2 years in a row. And so we put it back to get them back on schedule. And they went, what? Why is that number so high? Well, you can't say you're going to replace a vehicle in 12 years when you wear it out in 8. You got to be able to replace those on that timely schedule.
Great, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I see fire apparatus. Is that just kind of a regular fire truck, or is this one of the ones with bells, whistles, et cetera?
I don't think they come without bells, whistles, and everything else. Where are we at? On which side? I'm sorry. Okay, I'll get to that in just 1 second. I wanted to point out on this slide, again, under contractual professional services, we're showing a $700,000 expense. That's actually how we show the interfund loans. It goes out as a contractual to facilities for that.
Trip?
So on the deferred vehicle replacement charges
Yeah.
from past couple fiscal years, did we structure those as like a literal reduction in the charge? Or did we, in essence, extend like an interdepartment loan so it always showed up on the?
It was a direct reduction in the charge to the departments because the general fund couldn't sustain that. Yep. And it hit police, fire, and parks, all three.
Is the interfund loan even a possibility under we're basically on cash accounting, right?
Are you saying, can we even do the interfund loan out of here? Is that?
Well, I'm just thinking like, if I was on a fully accrual basis, the most accurate way of doing that, like you got to replace the vehicle at some point, right? So it would be to say, hey, you owe me the 500,000 or whatever to replace, for this year's replacement charge on your $1 million fire truck.
Yeah.
And half of that's going to be a loan that I'm not going to make you pay this year, and you can wait till the next budget cycle to pay for it. So it always shows on my books, or?
I think it essentially happens that way. If you are not fully funded, you can borrow from your other accrued funds. And so instead of starting out at 0, you might start out at minus 50,000. We're trying to discourage that because it's a hassle for JC and his team to accrue negative interest, but it is a way, and we can also then pull money from other vehicles. But again, you're buying away the future. So
Yeah, and we're trying to get away from people going on credit, because that's how you get the double hit, because you got to put it back and then replace the next one as well.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make sure that we get, when we do replace, don't have those negative balances, and tell us where you want to take it, and then we'll make a new plan every budget year for that repayment of that next vehicle.
So then, like, the check from an internal control perspective here would just be like, hey, you can only flirt with extending the useful life of an asset so much before it literally breaks before it was fully depreciated, right?
that's what we're balancing. Like right now with the Tahoes, we're like right on the edge of having run them a little bit too far. So on the equipment replacement schedule, and that's on page 276 of your budget book, I want to note, we are not buying 2 fire apparatus next year. We bought one in FY23, one in FY24. we're not sure when they're going to come in. We hope one of them is going to come in FY25, but we're not sure. The problem is, because we've bought them, we now have to be prepared to pay for them when they actually come in. So we're carrying a lot more money in the cash side of this account as a result of that. Same thing with Tahoes. We ordered 5 Tahoes in FY24, but they're not coming in until FY25. That's not true. We received 2. We received 2 of them this year. So we'll be able to pay for those this year. It's a real challenge. In fact, on my next slide, not that one, sorry. Vehicle availability, I don't know what's going on out there. It is extremely limited. We were given just a very short window. I never changed that. It says X hour. We were given a 1-day window, less than 1 day, to order Tahoes when that finally came through. Like, they called us up and said, if you're going to make an order, make it on Tuesday. Like, wait, what? And so we had to get our order in. We ordered 5. They gave us 4. As it turns out, another buyer backed out, so we were able to get that 5th one on order. But everything we do is very, very challenging that direction. Same thing with the fire apparatus. We ordered it, and they said, okay, we'll give it to you in 28 to 30 months. Wait, what? So it's kind of where the market is. The other real challenge now is upfitting vehicles has become very expensive. As I said, the police cars are more of a computer now than a vehicle, and that's really required. It helps them to be more efficient and do their job very, very well. But we'll pay, $60,000 for a Tahoe and then put another $20,000, $30,000, $35,000 in it in hardware. And get it on. And then also just the vehicle costs continue to increase pretty dramatically. And I will also say, we also do evaluate when we're going to start moving to electric. I know it's out there on the horizon. We're definitely looking at it on some of our vehicles that stay around town. We don't have a PPV, which is a police pursuit vehicle, electric vehicle option yet. But for a lot of our vehicles, it definitely is on the horizon.
Adriana?
How is the city deciding Chevy Tahoe versus all of the other vehicles that are used by police forces across
That's a great
America?
question. So years ago, we were Dodge Chargers or Challengers or something. And we were having a lot of injuries as the officers who are always laden with all that gear are climbing in and out of those low vehicles. At that time, this was before my time, but they piloted multiple vehicles and they settled on the Tahoe as the most useful, and it was very cost effective at that time. And so that's kind of where they landed. Other departments might use the Ford Explorer. I believe the sheriff's office is using the Explorer. And so we also reevaluated that. The reason you want to kind of stick with one over the other would be a lot of your stuff will transfer from vehicle to vehicle is one good reason, but the other is the officers get used to where everything is in the vehicle and they can do it from muscle memory as opposed to having to relearn when they move between vehicles. So.
Sorry, Valerie.
Yeah, you mentioned the 2 fire apparatus, and I'm trying to go back in my memory because it seems to me that we bought one and then realized that the cost was going up so high is that why we tried to cement, when we bought it, is that the price that we get it at?
As I recall, I don't know that we were quite ready to buy the second. Chief Larkin was here at that time, and he came through, and Pierce was offering us a pretty decent deal if we were able to put in that order on the second one. And so that's why we ordered the one in 23. And then recognizing how long the lag time was, Pierce came forward and said, well, we're going to have a price increase over here. You probably want to put an order in. And knowing it was going to be another 30 months, that kind of did fit our replacement schedule. So as you recall, when they did the bond and built the police station, we got 3 trucks at the exact same time. Now they're actually going to be split up on a pretty good cycle that will be much more affordable for us, and we're not trying to buy 3 trucks at once.
My second question was with that is that I always hear the complaint or people talking about always having the big fire trucks go out. Have we looked at smaller fire trucks to go to lower need?
I know that we do. I know one of the primary reasons we don't is because we're so short-staffed. When they go out to respond on something, they may get another call where they then have to respond as a fire unit. I think as you look at changing staffing models, there's definitely an option there. There's probably an option also maybe to run a smaller truck but that's for your next fire chief, I think, to evaluate. We are here to definitely support them in what that role might be.
Tripp?
So I'm guessing the bond concluded quite a bit ahead of the end of the fire truck's useful life?
I believe so. I can't
Right.
actually, have we paid off that bond?
Yeah.
Oh, we refinanced that one, right?
Well,
No, 2019.
And paid it off.
Right, that's the,
Yeah.
that was the tax.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
bond levy that expired. And so like, I mean, now we're saving up for the next fire trucks using money that we don't have matching tax revenue for, whereas we paid off everything pretty early in terms of the useful life of the asset.
Well, we've been setting aside dollars since the day we purchased them, though. So they were almost all fully funded. They weren't quite fully funded, but they were almost fully funded.
Yeah, but when we floated the bond and paid it back through property taxes, it wasn't for the fire truck we bought and the replacement for that fire truck we bought, right?
No.
So right now, none of the bond dollars that were coming in from property taxes that paid for the original fire truck are available because the bond's over.
I mean, you could technically do another one if you wanted to.
Yep.
There are some jurisdictions in the state of Oregon that do that on a cycle. Every so often, they go for another bond for equipment.
Yep. And is the bond, was that one of the bonds that wasn't subject to Measure 5 limitations, do we recall? That's correct?
So wrapping up, future challenges, replacement of the water treatment plant really is the first priority and the number one challenge of the Public Works Division and the City Council. All of our funding should be secured, we believe, by the end of calendar year 24. We have been approved for WIFIA, which is the Water Infrastructure Finance. The IA gets me every time. Anyway, it's the funding program through EPA, which is the most flexible water financing that you can get, very good rates. That will be our gap funding after we find out about BRIC. We'll work all of that out. Stormwater management is going to become a larger issue. We kind of touched on that when we talked about stormwater initially. As we roll out the management plan, all of the other rules that go along with that, you're going to see development change in response to that. Funding for large capital projects is going to continue to challenge public works staff. Items like the Foothill Roundabout, Redwood Highway looping, Spalding sewer upgrades, and then just the continual changing of the regulatory environment are going to tax us in the future. You probably all heard about PFAS. We are now furiously testing the water for PFAS, not because we think we're not going to be in compliance, but we're getting ready to spend $100 million on a treatment plant, and if there's even a chance that we're going to be getting close to it, we need to react and change to that. The good news is, it doesn't seem to be there in the water at a level that is even going to be remotely concerning, so we don't have to pivot the design on the water plant to respond to that. But those are the kind of things that we're going to be facing in the future years. Lastly, all of the divisions meet all of our regulatory requirements. The staff is just amazing. And they operate and maintain all of our infrastructure with very minimal resources, both from a human standpoint and from a capital standpoint, dollars. The council has been very proactive in ensuring adequate and appropriate funding for all of our operations, and we're grateful for that. But we have to then continue balancing that utility cost versus affordability for our customers, because it is an issue and we know it's an issue. As seen by, we've increased year after year after year our low-income assistance dollars to be able to better help our less fortunate. And then I just lastly want to thank them and their staff, because they make my job look easy. So with that, we are here for any questions. Or we'll go sit down and let you get on with business.
You survived it, yeah.
Always.
Okay, now
Thank you, guys.
the floor is open for comments or questions. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, Josh wants to get...
No, aren't we supposed to receive public comment?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. Public comments, questions, comments from the public. Jay?
Good evening. So I think I'm the only member of the public here. Does that mean I get like 5 minutes or so? Anyways, Jay Meredith, I had the privilege of, for a couple of you that I haven't met yet, I did have the privilege of serving as the city's finance director for the 10 years between 2010 and 2020. And so why am I here? Well, in addition to, just enjoying budget season as I used to, I really didn't want to miss the party that is Public Works Night, but really one of the reasons I'm here tonight is I'm growing more and more concerned as time goes on that we're not allocating enough resources to our police and fire departments. The stories that I'm hearing both in recent public meetings and from others that I know that work for the city are starting to get more and more concerning as time goes on. When, as the chief told you about on Tuesday night this week, it takes a long time to hire a police officer. There's a lot more overtime than there should be. Even the officers are even getting called back on, from their vacation. I hope that is not happening very often, but even once is too much. That's a very dangerous position for our officers, for the public. We need to solve that yesterday. So I believe with the action that the City Council has taken to approve a new public safety utility fee, that the city's actually very well positioned to hire what police and fire have stated are the additional staffing needs that they have for the short term. And that would be for 3 police officers, crime analyst, 3 firefighters, and a public safety facilities maintenance person. So I'm going to leave you here with a recommendation. The budget committee can't make the decision of whether to build additional positions into the budget or whether to hire additional positions. That's a responsibility of the City Council. But there is an action that the budget committee can take to make the City Council's give the City Council a little bit easier ability to hire those positions when the City Council is ready to do so. I'm going to be giving the City Council a couple of additional recommendations that they can take to start hiring more officers and firefighters sooner rather than later. But I want to give you this. It's a 4-page handout that I've provided to a couple of you, but I'm going to give you this. I've got a copy for each of you, as long as City Manager and JC don't take more than one of these. There's a copy for each of you. And I would really like you to consider this action so that we can get more police officers and firefighters out there as soon as possible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jay. Is there any other person in here that would like to comment or question or what's going on? Okay. Well, so do we have as a committee any questions or information requests from the city? Go ahead, Tripp.
We talked about on Tuesday, next meeting, we're going to discuss the policy and legislation section, which will include the contingencies for next year and unappropriated ending fund balances in the general fund. Back in 2021, there was some back and forth about what the difference between a contingency and an unappropriated ending fund balances. And there was this helpful memo that was written, 25-2021, which I would request be resubmitted since we've had a lot of different new faces on the budget committee and council since then. Because the distinction is something I anticipate us talking about next week. And it might be helpful to do a little pre-reading on that particular point. So can I move to make that request?
Yes. Yeah, move and make request to resubmit Council Memo 25-2021.
Yep.
Okay, and I got a second. Any discussion on it? Okay, in favor?
Aye.
It's overwhelmingly approved. Okay, any other, go ahead, Josh.
So I have two things that I'm just kind of looking for some clarification. And so the first one is that when we were talking about the assumed tax rate, it was something that Tripp had kind of brought up that just has stuck with me over the last 24 hours. And it said that it was assuming that we would be at a 1.5% tax for residential. It was a conservative number. I would really love to know, and I'm hopefully not creating a ton of work for JC, if that were put at 3%, because I just don't see us getting anywhere close to compression, what that would do to the ending fund balance. And I don't need it for today, but I would love to see it for Tuesday. So it's not like I'm saying do the math right now. I'm hopeful if it's relatively easy to do, but I think it's something that would be illuminating as we're kind of talking.
No, and I can provide that estimation. I will say that currently that we are 10 months through the fiscal year, we're about 98% of where we allocated property taxes to be this year. So our estimation is pretty close, year in and year out, within a 3% margin. So there's not necessarily a large, I guess, change to be made as far as how far we have been off as far as a staff projection.
Well, and I think that's kind of, I would like to kind of see that, because I am also kind of curious to know exactly how much we've saved year over year as well. Like, that's another piece that I'm kind of interested in, that over the last 3 years, how much have we actually spent versus what we budgeted?
You want to make that in the form of a motion, Josh?
If I need an official motion, I will make an official motion.
Well, we're supposed to do this as a committee, not individuals, so
I am
yes.
making those two motions, but then I have one more after that. So.
I'm looking for a second. Thank you, Valerie. Any more discussion on that? Okay, in favor? Okay. Good, and that passes.
And then I have one other request, and I guess it's more of a request back to the chief. And one other thing that's kind of stuck with me. So he had mentioned that we had 8 positions that they were still struggling to fill. That, to his credit, he's doing an amazing job of making sure he gets the right people there. I would love to know if we reallocated, or does he need some kind of incentive or bonus? Is there something else that he could use in his toolbox to be able to get those positions filled? Because I think one of the things that's creating more of a headache here is when you don't have those positions filled, that makes your FMLA, that makes all of the other stuff there just so much harder to handle. So that's a question I have of the chief. I don't know exactly if I need an official or not, but that's something that's been sticking with me too. So I would like to make a motion for the chief to possibly respond to, are there ways that we could help him, or he has recommendations to this budget to fully fulfill the full allocation and have all of his folks hired?
Perfect. Second? Second by Valerie. Any discussion? Want the chief to give us an idea how to keep people on?
I have a little discussion.
Okay.
So, I mean, what we talked about last, those 8 vacant positions are fully budgeted as if they're going to be filled, right? And as we'll talk about tomorrow, there is a very healthy contingency budgeted in the general fund. So if there were like a bonus that could be given out to help fill those 8 positions that are budgeted, council, assuming we approve the contingency next week, will have the ability to appropriate those on their own. And I'm just not sure, like, having staff go out and try to figure out like what the program should be when the dollars and cents to be able to fund any such programs are already tentatively and likely to be approved.
May I respond? So I agree. I hear exactly what you said. They've got the flexibility, but budgets mean values. And if you have an allocated setup where it's like, hey, this is what we want to do, and you've got a setup that says this is a recruitment and retention fund, and this is what we want you spent on it, that's how you spend money. And so that's why at least want to at least have a conversation, or at least hear, are there these types of things? It may just be there aren't enough people to fill the position. That's a perfectly acceptable answer too. I'm just trying to, I think it's really hard to make an argument to the public that we need more police if we don't have a position's completely filled. And I want to make sure that that's done, because I do think we need more police officers, but I don't want, I think it's important that we solve problem number one here.
Okay,
Mr.
more
Chair,
discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Oh,
Okay.
Rick.
I'd like to make a
Rick?
motion to extend the meeting past 9 o'clock.
Oh,
Second?
Okay, so in favor. Now,
Aye.
sorry, you're over there out of hand. Okay, so, I think we've completed that, and I think,
Well, I had a couple
sorry.
more.
Did you
I had
want-
something.
Oh, I would just say that, like, we're not budgeting or like approving a budget at the level of like specific initiatives. We're approving personnel services, right? So, again, whereas I'm interested in the revenue question, I'm not sure it's really worth staff's time.
The chief did say during his presentation that they just don't have the resources to recruit, market this town, in addition to people not passing background, not passing, the 16-hour week course. But he did make a comment that there's nobody here to do the recruiting, to go out and headhunt essentially. And then I believe that the additional officers that are being requested are, assuming the 8 is fulfilled and we hire those 8 officers, we still will not have enough law enforcement for the needs of our community based on the crimes and all the et cetera that law enforcement does.
Okay, I think we voted, and I think it passed, so I think we've completed the.
We didn't vote.
We didn't vote? Okay, right. Okay. Oh, we voted on extending the meeting.
Which
Okay.
that successfully passed,
I didn't know I
yes.
said that, but okay. Now, on the motion on the floor, those in favor, raise your hands. Good. Okay.
Just for the
And
record, I'm opposed.
I think, does oppose, there's one and there's an abstention over there, or no, he's against, okay.
For the record, mention who is opposed. Opposed, please raise your hand. Go.
So there's
Okay.
two.
Trip.
Okay, so
Tripp
I
and-
think we've
and Council
completed
Riker.
the evening's business, and we will adjourn until
Doesn't
7
cover-
o'clock next Tuesday.
Yeah.
I mean, 6
So to be
o'clock
clear, the
next
motion
Tuesday.
didn't pass because we had 7 of.
Yep.
Oh,
8
I'm
of-
sorry.
8 of 10.
Yes, we have to vote, I apologize. We have to vote on tentative improvement of the programs we discussed today.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yes, sir.
It did not pass because we need 8 votes in order to pass a bill of the committee of 15, and we only have 7 votes in favor.
I don't think,
Actually, I might be wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, yeah.
Okay, 8 of 10, okay, we're good. Never mind, it passed, yeah.
behave. Okay. So now we need a vote.
To go home?
No, we need that vote. You just said we don't have enough to do. We need the vote to approve the budget that we went over tonight. Can I get a motion for that?
I make a motion to approve the budget that we went over tonight in
Can I
Public
get a
Works.
second by Kurt? Okay, in favor? Now you need to raise your hands, please. Thank you. That's really good. Hey, unanimous. Now we're done. Nice job, everybody. Thank you.